Okay, good evening, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. It's just gone 6:30, so welcome along to tonight's meeting of the Rushcliffe Borough Council Planning Committee. Because we've got rather a lot of visitors here tonight, I think it's only fair that we perhaps give a health and safety bit of advice just in case anything happens. So, Mr. Pegram, if you could please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we're not expecting the alarm to sound this evening for an emergency. So if it does, we will have to vacate the chamber. Two options for that. Either we go out the side doors here, out into reception, through the front, out onto the concourse area at the front and move to the top end away from the building. If that route is unavailable to us, we go through 3 sets of double doors at the back, turn left, out through the side door, and then we congregate in the far corner of the car park at the back. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Hopefully we won't need to evacuate, just on the safe side. So, as I say, welcome along to tonight's meeting. I'm Councillor Richard Butler, the Chairman of the committee. To my left is Councillor John Stockwood, who is the Vice Chairman. To his left is Mrs Soul, who is our Borough Solicitor. To her left is Mr Elliott from Constitutional Services and Miss Webb from Constitutional Services. And on my right, Mr Pegram, who is the Service Manager for Communities, and to his right, Mrs Dunn, who is an Area Planning Officer, and also Miss Catlow is also an Area Planning Officer. That's just so you know who we are, and the committee are my colleagues sitting around the table here. Now, as you know, we've got a very busy agenda tonight. There is a lot on the agenda. We're busy. There are all planning applications are very important. Obviously, there are some tonight which are big applications. So what I think I ought to warn you is we have an absolute cut-off time for this meeting of 10 o'clock, which is probably a sensible thing, because after 3.5 hours or so, you have to take serious decisions, and I think it's in everyone's interest, if need be, to stop the meeting then. And if there are any items left on the agenda which we haven't got to tonight, and I'm very aware that we have got a lot of applications tonight, we will carry them forward to a special meeting of the committee in the next couple of weeks. So I hope you understand and agree with that, but we have got a busy meeting. So without further ado, we'll get into the meeting. I have to read a statement about these microphones. And it's the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulations 2014 allows filming and recording by anyone attending meeting is not within the Council's control. Rushcliffe Borough Council is committed to being open and transparent in its decision making. As such, the Council will undertake audio recordings of meetings which are open to the public, except where it's resolved that the public be excluded, as the information being discussed is confidential or otherwise exempt. In order to enable recording, please use the microphones, this is for committee and speakers, at all times when speaking, and tonight's meeting is being recorded for training purposes only. So that's a little thing we have to do to do with the microphones. So we'll go into the main item at the start of the agenda, which is apologies for absence and substitute members, please.
Apologies from Councillor Clark with Councillor Hetherington substituting. Apologies from Councillor Greenwood with Councillor Purdue-Horan substituting, and Councillor Hull is substituting for Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Purdue-Horan, we've had a message. He's on the way from another meeting, another council meeting, and he's either driving around the car park looking for somewhere to park, or but he's definitely on his way. So Councillor Purdue-Horan will be joining us. Any declarations of interest, please, under the Code of Conduct or under the Planning Code? Councillor Hull.
Thank you, Chair. 180177 full. I have declared an interest on this application as the applicant is my son.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Edwards.
Yes, I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary personal interest in the application regarding Asher Lane, Ruddington, and I shall withdraw from the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting us know. And no other apologies? Right, so we go on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 13th of September. For colleagues who were here at that meeting, is it your wish I sign the minutes? Happy for me to do that? Thank you. What's the date? 11th. Right, so we now go on to the start of tonight's planning applications that we're here to discuss. The first item on tonight's agenda is land off Shelford Road Farm, Shelford Road, Radcliffe-on-Trent, and this is an outline application for development of up to 400 dwellings, a primary school, health centre and associated infrastructure including highway and pedestrian access, open space and structural landscaping. And Mrs Dunn, I think you're talking us through this, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start first with matters of process and updates. Members have been circulated details of the late representations for the site, which include some minor changes to conditions 3 and 35 to reflect an updated framework plan, revision F, and condition 9 to refer to a section 38 agreement, not section 278, with the County Council to secure implementation of those approved details. The draft section 106 table terms is also amended in relation to health matters to secure a reserve site for 6 years, not 5 years as set out in the table, with a financial contribution towards healthcare provision to be paid prior to occupation of 25% of the dwellings, not 80% as previously proposed. Members should also be aware that condition 12, part 14, is incomplete and should read at the end and will allow for a development that complements and does not prejudice the delivery of the neighbouring site at Grooms Cottage. So this is a site on the edge of Radcliffe-on-Trent, subject to an outline application for 400 dwellings, and it includes land for a potential site for a health centre and primary school. The site is within the Greenbelt. To assist members in locating the property, this plan has been prepared to show the relationship of the application site, here outlined in red, in relation to the identified village centre within the neighbourhood plan, other Part 2 sites that are proposed to come forward for residential development in the form of Grooms Cottage here, land to the south, Grantham Road there, land to the rear of the RSPCA, and land in this corner here. The plan also shows the location of the health centre and education schools, form of junior, infant and secondary school. The village of Radcliffe-on-Trent has an adopted neighbourhood plan which was adopted in October last year, which identifies the potential directions of growth for the village. I've brought this forward onto the presentation to show you the village centre. The site subject to this application is located here, which is identified as a potential direction of growth for the village. I propose to show members photographs around the site to show the proposal in context and then move on to the details of the application. This is the site from a distance on the opposite side of the A52. I brought this photo really to show the site in context with the existing development. So we've got the A52 running down in the valley there. We've got the existing built form of Clumber Drive to the left-hand side of the photograph. To the top of the site is Shelford Road. We've got 2 residential properties, Hunter Stables and Grooms Cottage here. This location around here is the Red Mile House, which fronts onto Shelford Road. The application site follows this hedgerow boundary here, comes along the railway line to the south of the site and back up the side boundary with Clumber Drive. Now moving on towards the edge of the development site, so we're now on to Shelford Road. This is the last residential property in the linear form of the main part of Shelford Road, and then we have a field here which is part of Grooms Cottage. Shelford Road then extends up towards Shelford, Newton, the RF Newton and the village of Newton this way. This is the access into 2 residential properties, into Stables and Grooms Cottage. It also forms the edge of the application site. This is the access down to Hunter's Stables and Groom Cottage. The Part 2 proposed site of Groom's Cottage is to the right of that photograph. This is the start of the development site, which then loops around those two properties. This is a property called Red Mile House. Again, the application site links around this cottage. Existing access to Shelford Farm is by way of this access here. These are some of the old farm buildings within the site that are proposed to be demolished. Now we're within the site. There has been some archaeological investigations on the site, and this shows the form of the development along Clumber Drive. Back into the site, and we're now looking back over towards where the first photograph was taken, somewhere over the region there. Railway line forms the southern boundary. Back to Red Mile House. The application is an outline application with all matters reserved except access. Access is proposed into the site by way of a new roundabout to be formed in this location here. So we've got the last residential properties driveway, and then we're out into the open countryside. These are examples of properties on the opposite side of Shelford Road. This again is the last access on the left-hand side of Shelford Road. Moving out of the application site, we're looking back towards the site. We've got a pair of properties here. Again, looking back towards the application site. This is the first property as you enter Radcliffe-on-Trent on the right-hand side. And that forms, if we look across there, proposed roundabout is going in the region of that property. This is the hedgerow existing, moving back down Shelford Road, past Red Mile House, past the properties on the right-hand side that form the existing boundary. And that's an example of the properties along Clumber Drive, which form the western boundary of the site. This is the development framework plan that has been submitted with the application. So it is an outline application for 400 dwellings. It proposes a site for a health centre and a primary school. These are reserved sites if needed in the future to deliver those facilities. Access, as I talked about earlier, is by way of a roundabout in this location here. Red Mile House, the white building that we just looked at in the photographs, is that property there. We've got Groom's Cottage and Hunter's Stables there. The area in white here is not part of the application site. That is in different ownership, and that is Groom's Cottage site that is now subject to an outline planning application that was validated yesterday. We will be going out to consultation on that very shortly. So as the site is in the green belt, careful consideration needs to be given to a number of matters. The application proposed the retention of the existing hedgerows on the site. There is an acknowledgement that the roundabout to be created in this location here will result in the loss of the hedgerows along that frontage. And this plan has been revised to reflect that. The area in this southeast corner is proposed to be safeguarded for an area of land to potentially allow in the future a footbridge, cycle bridge crossing of the railway line to land on an area of land here, which is subject to a potential site coming forward in Part 2. The scale of the development means that Section 106 contributions are required for matters relating to health, education, leisure, highways, including improvements to bus services. These have been assessed against the SIL regulations and considered to meet the necessary tests. Members will note there is proposed LEAP, a local equipped area for play, within the centre of the site, amenity space down to the southern boundary, and a series of sustainable drainage features to allow for adequate drainage. Those are technical matters that need to be resolved at the reserve matter stage should members support the application. The roundabout is a matter to be determined at this stage. So proposed access to the site, there has been a detailed technical drawing prepared and approved by Nottinghamshire County Council, and it's been prepared by the developer but approved by the Nottinghamshire County Council, and it allows for an access within the site. There is alterations proposed to some of the existing residential properties, as shown there. The report sets out the considerations that need to be taken into account when determining the application. The key messages that I must emphasise is that the site is in the Greenbelt, and therefore, as residential development of this nature is considered to be inappropriate development, very special circumstances must be demonstrated to justify a grant of planning permission. The applicant has set out quite clearly what they consider to be the very special circumstances in this particular instance, and I refer to members to paragraph 13 of the report in this respect. Radcliffe-on-Trent has an adopted neighbourhood plan which forms part of the development plan. The diagram that I've previously been presented to you shows the broad location of growth with this application within the area identified as suitable. Consideration of the relevant policies within the neighbourhood plan has been given throughout the report, with particular focus in paragraphs 210 to 227. It is concluded that the proposal is in general accordance with the various policies, and subsequent reserve matters can ensure the provision of adequate details to secure compliance with the more detailed aspects of the neighbourhood plan. Radcliffe-on-Trent is identified in our core strategy as a key settlement for growth, with a minimum of 400 dwellings identified. This has always envisaged a release of the Greenbelt around Radcliffe-on-Trent, and the evidence undertaken in the background technical studies identifies this site as low value in both Greenbelt review terms and landscape and visual impact assessment. It is contained within existing form of built development, both to the north and to the west and to the south. The further work undertaken within Part 2 proposes that Radcliffe-on-Trent is a village that should take increased growth to ensure that the level of housing delivery is appropriate to meet the Borough Council's short and long-term housing targets. Part 2 identifies that Radcliffe-on-Trent is capable of delivering 920 dwellings in the locations as shown on the plan that I've previously shown. To ensure that health and education matters are satisfactorily addressed in the longer term, 2 sites are proposed within the site to be reserved for such purposes. This is in accordance with the emerging local plan policy 5.3. On this basis, officers are happy to present a recommendation to support a grant of outline planning permission, subject to the conditions as set out in the report, as amended at conditions 3, 9, 12 and 35, as advised earlier, and subject to the signing of the Section 106 as set out in the draft heads of terms. As the site is located within the Greenbelt, it will be necessary to refer the application to the National Casework Unit to allow the opportunity for the Secretary of State to call in the application, and the recommendation reflects that requirement. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now we have a new way of working where we are able to allow speakers from the public and interested parties, and we have 4 speakers for this item. We have the first name I have on my list there is Mark Rose, who is the agent for the applicant. The way it works is speakers will sit at one of the chairs there, and when you're ready to start speaking, press the right-hand button, the red light will come on, and you have up to 5 minutes to speak. There's a screen here, we'll start counting down, and if you're still speaking at 5 minutes, I literally have to cut you off. So as soon as you're ready, and this applies to all speakers, it's the same rules. Sorry, what?
It says the clock is saying 0 at the moment, and then it says 5 and then ticks.
That's right, it will start at 5 and start counting down to 0, yes. Yeah. Well, we hope, when the technical...
It's going to start at 0 and it's
Okay,
going to go up to 5.
Right, well, we can do it the other way. Normally do a countdown. We're going to do a count up this time. I beg your pardon. So we're starting at 0, so it will go up to 5 minutes, and that will
Give you a
be the
warning
time
at
we have.
7:30.
Okay,
4:30.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to reinforce the planning merits of the proposals before you, and also to highlight the significant benefits that would result from the delivery of the residential development within this site. The proposed development fully accords with the spatial strategy set out in the adopted core strategy, which clearly recognises Radcliffe-on-Trent as an important service centre in the borough and an entirely appropriate and sustainable focus for growth. The urgency to deliver new homes to address the borough's identified housing needs is very clear, and it is for this reason that the site is proposed for removal from the Greenbelt and allocated for residential development under Policy 5.3 of your emerging local plan. It's also for this reason that the site has been identified as an appropriate direction for growth within the neighbourhood plan. Overall, the site is relatively unconstrained, and the proposals have evolved through a careful design exercise that has taken into account detailed discussions with your officers and other key stakeholders and the conclusions of detailed technical and environmental assessments. The application has demonstrated that the proposed development is entirely appropriate in highways, drainage, ecology, heritage and landscape terms. It would deliver a high-quality housing development with a very clear sense of place that is well integrated with the built form of Radcliffe and fully respects its relationship with the surrounding countryside. The site can accommodate 400 new homes, 120 of which would be affordable. That scale of provision would make a very valuable contribution to meeting the borough's housing needs and would also help to address the 5-year housing land supply shortage, providing new housing opportunities and more choice for local people to remain or return to the area. The development would also result in new job creation and more people to spend in the local area and support the community services and facilities within the village. It would also generate monies from the new homes bonus and substantial Section 106 contributions to local services and infrastructure, including towards local education and health facilities. Notably, if the improvement of the primary school or the health provision within the village centre is not possible, then the scheme would provide accessible sites for the provision of a new primary school and medical centre that will meet the needs of the proposed growth around the village and the existing capacity and qualitative issues within the existing facilities. The development would also provide over 5 hectares of public open space, including areas for play, allotments and informal recreation space, and financial contributions will be made towards sports and recreation provision elsewhere in the village. The application will retain the majority of the hedgerows and trees in and around the site, supplementing these with substantial new planting to reflect and enhance the local landscape character. This would integrate the development with the adjacent countryside by softening the settlement edge and, together with the sustainable drainage features, provide notable ecological benefits. In terms of highways, the transport assessment has been carefully examined by the County Council and Highways England, and a comprehensive approach to mitigation has been agreed. Vehicle access would be from a new roundabout on Shelford Road, and that has been safely audited and approved by the Highway Authority. This would act as a gateway feature at the village entrance, and the proposed works also include the provision of speed reduction measures along Shelford Road to enhance highway safety. New and improved pedestrian crossings are proposed on Shelford Road and in the village centre, with improved bus stops and a financial contribution to the local bus service that will improve frequency from 60 to 40 minutes. The scheme also fully accords with the development requirements set out in Policy 5.3, as it will ensure that the amenity of neighbouring properties is not unacceptably affected, that land is safeguarded for a pedestrian and cycle bridge over the railway line to the south, to the site to the south, and ensure that it is integrated with the development of the adjacent site when it comes forward. For the reasons I've outlined, we believe the very special circumstances required to allow development on the site prior to its formal removal from the Greenbelt and allocation for development have been clearly demonstrated, and the planning application entirely accords with the provisions of the NPPF and the relevant planning policies. The development would clearly constitute sustainable development, resulting in a new in a number of significant economic, social and environmental benefits, not least by providing much needed housing, community facilities and infrastructure and substantial areas of accessible and attractive public open space. Finally, it's relevant to note that William Davis are a locally based developer with an excellent reputation for the quality of homes that they build and their considerate construction practices and management. This scheme is very important to them and they wish to progress the development as soon as possible, working with your officers and other key stakeholders to ensure the development runs as smoothly as possible. In that light, we support the conclusions drawn in your officers' committee report and hope that the members will follow the recommendation in granting planning permission on this basis. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think you 1 second to go in 5 minutes, so thank you very much for that. Our next speaker is Chris Murphy. I think that's the correct name. Are you here, Mr. Murphy? And you're speaking against the application, and again you will have up to 5 minutes. So as soon as you're ready, right hand button, the red light will come on.
I'm going to risk a few seconds of my time by explaining that I'm actually standing in for Dawn Smith, who had to go with her father to hospital in an emergency this afternoon and has asked me to stand in for her. She did consult me when she prepared her notes, but I will therefore try and read them out for her. Our objection builds on the 147 objections received against the application and is in two parts. Firstly, that the application for very special circumstances is premature, and secondly, that residents and the parish council comments have not been properly considered. Concerning prematurity, no attempt has been made to look at how this case is different to Ruddington. There are in fact three key differences. Firstly, the local plan has been subject to a significant modification post-consultation, increasing the housing allocation from 820 to 920. Further consultation is therefore required. Secondly, representations have been made which oppose the housing allocation in Radcliffe outlined in the draft local plan. This is on the basis that decision-making behind the allocation is irrational and unjustified and therefore unsound. It is based on a new primary school being required, which requires upwards of 1,000 homes for it to be sustainable. Therefore, to propose 920 homes is flawed logic. The new school, by the council's own assertion, will not be sustainable. There are also alternatives available for meeting housing targets related to addressing delays in other developments across the borough. The third key difference is that this application is in direct conflict with the adopted neighbourhood plan, not as it is explained as in your report. The committee report at paragraph 147 underlines the fact that the neighbourhood plan carries more weight than plans which have not been adopted. These points must be considered before an argument of prematurity can be dismissed. It cannot be foisted onto the planning casework unit. Moving on to the application itself, there is insufficient time to mention the range of objections relating to the scale of this development, and it's the scale of which is the source of most objections. However, I'll try to highlight the key points raised in the 147 objections to this application. These are well summarised by the Radcliffe Parish Council and indeed Shelford Parish Council, and I would urge members to look again at these paragraphs 30 to 32 of your report, particularly because they outline how the development directly conflicts with the neighbourhood plan. The Council is required to give due consideration to these comments as a whole and not just as a collection of individual comments. It is certainly insufficient just to list them. There is no evidence of this proper consideration having taken place from the committee report that you are discussing this evening. Indeed, paragraph 222 of the committee report completely ignores the concerns set out by the parish council about the conflict with criterion 5 of policy 10 of the adopted neighbourhood plan, namely that a minimum of 400 homes should be delivered across several sites, not on all one site. Even if the housing allocation is increased to 920, to put almost half of them on one site is not in accordance with the intention of the neighbourhood plan. The exclusion of this point in the committee report is evidence of consultation comments not being given due consideration. Relating to other consultation responses, you will see that traffic and associated safety issues are a major concern by the residents who actually live there. The issue of the inevitable increase in traffic in Oakfield Lane and the danger this causes to road users on the A52 has never been responded to, even though Shelford Parish Council and some residents have raised this. The traffic report is impenetrable for the public, and it's not clear the extent to which proper account has been made of the additional traffic caused by people outside of the development travelling to and from the school and the health centre to make appointments, collect prescriptions, and so on. People don't just attend the great GP to make appointments anymore. They are busy hubs of the community. Has this been accounted for? It doesn't seem to us. The community has raised very real concerns about the increased traffic flow on Shelford Road, traffic congestion in the village and associated safety issues, and there's not been proper consideration of this. We live on Shelford Road. Every time we try and get out of our drive, it's dangerous. And another 600, 700 houses will cause an accident, and if you vote this through, any fatalities will be on your heads. In summary, I and others strongly object to this application on the basis that it is premature, and there are specific grounds for rejecting it on this basis. The scale of the development is inappropriate and is in direct conflict with the neighbourhood plan, and comments to this fact have not been properly considered.
Thank you very much. And again, well timed, and also well, I understand, I know it's like, especially when you're standing in the last minute as well. So
Yes, I didn't get much chance.
no, but I think we heard you very clearly. Thank you. Right, our next speaker is from the Radcliffe-on-Trent Parish Council, Martin Coleshaw, please. And I'm sure you know how it is. Right-hand button and up to 5 minutes as soon as you're ready.
Good evening. I'm Chair of Radcliffe's Planning and Environment Committee. What I have to say comes from the Parish Council and is based in part on the community plan, which was produced in 2014, and the neighbourhood plan, which you've heard quite a bit about tonight. The Parish Council accepts in principle the 920 new houses proposed for Radcliffe, but we have a number of concerns with aspects associated with various developments as a whole, and specifically about William Davis's application. Radcliffe Health Centre is currently located in the centre of the village. However, it is no longer fit for purpose, being too small to deal with the current population, never mind the increase that will come in the next 10 years. The proposed location for a new health centre on the William Davis site is completely inappropriate because of access difficulties for at least half the population of the village. Rather, the Parish Council wants a new health centre to be built in the centre of the village, preferably within the main road regeneration area highlighted in our neighbourhood plan. We strongly believe that this is feasible. For similar reasons, we also strongly opposed to the location of the primary school classrooms on the William Davis site. We have spoken with representatives of the existing two schools, and they have convinced us that there is sufficient room on the current sites for new classrooms to be built there. Indeed, we understand that the existing infant school will need to be replaced entirely in the near future. Consequently, we do not understand why Nottinghamshire County Council thinks that this is not an option, and no reasons have ever been given to us. Our neighbourhood plan makes clear our preferred housing mix. In particular, we want to see a number of bungalows added to what has been previously proposed. Also, we are concerned that while William Davis appeared to accept the inclusion of 30% affordable housing, this might slip during the piecemeal development of the site. We expect Rushcliffe Council to ensure that this and other developments all adhere to the requirements of our neighbourhood plan. One of our main concerns is traffic, particularly in the very recent rise in the number of houses to 920 in total. We're concerned both about what will happen on Shelford Road and on the A52. We do not believe the traffic assessment carried out by William Davis, because it does not appear to take into account the effect of the adjacent housing site of Savills, Groom Cottage, which would take the number of houses to 450, nor the potential effect of other developments proposed for Radcliffe and in Newton, in East Bridgeford and on the north side of Bingham. William Davis also appears not to accept that a bypass from the top of Shelford Road across the railway on a new bridge to the A52 is a reasonable requirement. We note that at least 2 of our borough councils support this, as do we. We believe that a new traffic assessment for the whole village, taking into account all the proposed new developments, is required before final decisions on individual developments, including this one, are made. Traffic congestion and pollution could be improved by encouraging greater use of public transport, walking and cycling as required in the National Planning Policy Framework. We need confirmation about the long-term availability of the Shelford Road Villager bus service, and I mean long-term, not 3 years. And Radcliffe Station is in need of 3 main improvements to encourage use of the train. Radcliffe has few leisure facilities for citizens older than about 10. The parish council is developing a new leisure facility at Wharf Lane. However, that's beyond our ability to fund, and consequently we hope that Section 106 or SIL monies will be available to assist with this from this development and other new ones. Simply providing outdoor pitches is not enough. Finally, a minor point, however, the construction of the footbridge across the railway is welcome and must go ahead, but it should be in the southwest corner of the site, not the southeast, as that will be nearer the village.
Thank you very much. And again, bang on 5 minutes. You must have been practising against the clock, but thank you for that. Right, our final speaker on this item is one of the ward members, Councillor Upton. So when you're ready, please.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. I do not object to this application in principle, but I do have some reservations as set out in clause 26 of the report. As portfolio holder for housing planning and waste management, I'm acutely aware of the national housing crisis, concerns about the green belt and the need for infrastructure. Radcliffe is a sustainable settlement for growth, and as an inset green belt village, it was always envisaged that new homes would have to be built in the current green belt. That said, we need new housing to enhance viability and vitality and to enable young families to stay in the village and for older residents to downsize. Following detailed studies and public consultations, the Neighbourhood Plan and the Local Plan Part 2 both promote this site as a preferred housing site. I do object to having a health centre and primary school on this site. This is contrary to the Neighbourhood Plan, and I would much prefer that financial contributions are made so these facilities can be kept in the village centre. I am not convinced that the existing health centre, primary and secondary school provisions cannot be expanded on their existing sites. Shelford Road traffic is increasing year on year, and I suggest that a new Eastern Relief Road from Shelford Road to the A52 should be planned now and the route safeguarded to take through traffic out of the village centre. I accept this development cannot be expected to fund the project, but a Section 106 contribution would be appropriate. I support the Nottinghamshire campaign for better transport and their objective to improve the Nottingham to Grantham railway line. And I'm pleased to see the applicant has agreed to improve cycle facilities at Radcliffe Station, but very disappointed there is no contribution to improve the car park. Regarding the site access, an application has been received for the adjoining site known as Groom's Cottage, and I ask that these two sites are considered together for their roads infrastructure and access onto Shelford Road. At the very least, a planning condition that this development has a road access provided to the adjoining site. This would give 2 access points off Shelford Road for the potential 450 plus houses of both sites. I urge you to look carefully at the position of the proposed roundabout for this development and consider the impact it will have on existing houses on Shelford Road. In my opinion, it should be relocated further up Shelford Road. I'm pleased that 30% of the dwellings will be affordable homes, and I ask for a condition that these are not all put together in one area, but pepper-potted around the site. The housing design should comply with the neighbourhood plan, and in addition, compliance with the Design Council Building for Life 12 guide, I would like a planning condition that the designs are reviewed by OPUN, who manage the East Midlands Design Review Panel. Regarding the proposed public open spaces, it is essential that a management company is established to maintain these areas in the future. I would urge that significant landscaping and planting is provided to screen existing dwellings from the proposed development, especially those properties known as the hunting stables and Groom's Cottage. Given the limited road access to this site and the estimated 4.5 years to complete the development, I suggest a planning condition that a time restriction is placed on construction traffic to avoid peak traffic periods. Finally, I'm pleased to see that financial contributions will be made to local sport and leisure facilities. So to conclude, my suggested planning conditions are: 1, that the application site and the adjacent site known as Groom's Cottage are considered together for the provision of roads and access to Shelford Road. 2, that the 30% of affordable homes are pepper-potted around the site. 3, that the house designs are reviewed by OPUN. 4, that a time restriction is placed on site construction traffic to avoid peak traffic periods. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Upton, well within 5 minutes. Right, well, we heard from Mr. Rose, who was speaking on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Murphy, who was objecting, Mr. Coleshaw from the Parish Council, who is also raising his objections, and Councillor Upton, who was also making his points as well. As well as those, we've also received the separate late comments from other ward members, Councillors Clark and Councillor Smith, and also other relevant bodies, interested parties. I know we've all received these as well. So with all those comments we've heard this evening, both in favour and also against, and queries and questions, can we pick up on those, please? Who's starting on this? Is it?
Chairman, I think I'm going to try and take most of those points with the assistance of Mrs. Dunn. Just in terms of the order of the speakers, Mr. Murphy spoke about the consultation, and I think he was referring, in fact, to the local plan consultation, which is still an ongoing process. Yes, we did look to increase numbers in various villages and towns around Rushcliffe. That proposal, those increases were subject to a further consultation in February of this year. That is a different issue to this application, obviously. That is our emerging local plan position. This application deals with one site, albeit it seeks to address the housing needs that are identified in the core strategy and in the emerging local plan part 2. In terms of traffic concerns, Chairman, you're going to hear my usual standard phrase. Clearly, this application has been the subject of consultations both with the Nottinghamshire County Council as Highway Authority, but also with the Highways England in terms of the impact on the trunk road network. Those bodies have examined the transport statement, so we don't take the transport statement or indeed any information that comes with an application on face value. It is subject to scrutiny by the technical consultees. Those technical consultees are now at a point where they're satisfied with those documents. There are no outstanding concerns as far as I'm aware with the transport assessment, and both parties are not raising an objection to this application on highway grounds. Moving on, Chairman, in terms of some of the other points, just to re-emphasise, as Mrs. Dunn did in her presentation, the health centre site and the school site are safeguarded. We are fully aware, and we have ourselves, various officers, not just from planning, been in discussions with the parish council and the doctors in an attempt to try and address this issue of the deficiencies in the current health centre. We are fully aware that the neighbourhood plan requires that that health centre should be provided within the centre of the village, and those discussions and those that search for site, if you like, will continue regardless of this application. But obviously, if those efforts should fail, this site does provide potentially safeguarded sites for the provision of those facilities. If ultimately that requirement is met on another site within the village, then the contributions from this site, the financial contributions, will be directed towards that solution. These sites only kick in my view, as a last resort if an alternative site or sites cannot be found. I would add that the development of this scale would not normally justify the provision of a health centre site or a school site. So the developer has put those forward not only to address the impacts of his own site, but in fact to address the growth within the village generally. But I would emphasise again, and sorry to repeat it, Chairman, those sites are reserved, they're safeguarded in the event that all other attempts fail. We have been advised, I think, by County Council that the education needs can't be met on those other sites. We have questioned that. We will continue to question that as we move forward with growth in Radcliffe-on-Trent. But again, that school site is safeguarded in the event that it becomes necessary to provide a site in this location. Chairman, there is a requirement in the Section 106 for 30% affordable housing. I think there was concern that that might slip through the process due to what was referred to as a piecemeal approach to the development. This is an overarching outline application. So this application relates to the whole site for 400 dwellings, and the details will come forward in terms of the location of that affordable housing in the reserve matters. But the developer is indicating to us that he is willing to sign up to the Section 106 agreement under the heads of terms that have been produced, which require 30% affordable housing throughout the life of the development. So we've got an overarching outline proposal which will no doubt come in phases, given the size of this development, but though that requirement for 30% will be fixed across the whole development. Cross sort of reference in the different speakers, I know that Councillor Upton raised a concern about the location of that affordable housing and the need for that to be pepper potted. We wouldn't normally put a condition on an application requiring that. Effectively, that is our policy, that is what our strategic housing manager would require, and we will seek to ensure through our discussions and the consideration of subsequent reserve matters applications that indeed that affordable housing is pepper potted. So it's not all clustered in one area, and it should be tenure blind as well. I think there was a suggestion, Chairman, there should be a relief road associated with this development. I think the parish council speaker suggested that that was a reasonable requirement, together with a bridge over the railway line. Chairman, this is only a development of 400 houses. We know from our experience the difficulties of delivering a footbridge associated with slightly larger schemes. If I can just remind members that the requirements of the SIL regulations are that any contributions should be commensurate to the scale of development. They should seek to address the impacts of the development. Clearly, this development alone does not provide such impacts that would require such a large piece of infrastructure and a bridge crossing over the railway line. Clearly, we do have to have regard for viability. We have to ensure that the sites are deliverable. If I can use a very crude term, a bridge and a relief road would just blow this scheme out of the water completely, Chairman. Yes, there was a question raised, Chairman, about road access to the adjacent site, and if Mrs. Dunn can just indicate. Yes, I would say, people would say it would make common sense for us to consider both these schemes together. So that's the current application, which has been with us for around 4 years, and the Groom's Cottage one, which has only just arrived on our desk. That would be common sense, Chairman. However, common sense doesn't always apply to planning. People often say that. The scheme before you has been assessed in terms of the adequacy of the roundabout to service the proposal that is before you. We have had before the application came in on Grooms Cottage, separate discussions with the landowners there, and we involved the Highway Authority in those discussions. The Highway Authority are satisfied that the Grooms Cottage site can be served by an independent access. There are desires to provide pedestrian links between the two sites, as indicated by the blue arrow. Your officers don't consider that a secondary access, and the Highway Authority don't consider that a secondary access is necessary to serve these or this development. Each development can stand on its own. We have seen from other sites, Chairman, in the borough, that where you have multiple ownership, it does present difficulties in delivery. This scheme can stand alone. It can consume its own smoke in terms of highway impacts and access, as can the Grooms Cottage one. So I don't consider there's any justification whatsoever, Chairman, to defer consideration of either application. Both applications can be considered independently on their own merits. Right, so the issue about controlling hours of traffic, the old 1197, which dealt with planning conditions, did specifically advise against seeking to control construction traffic and the routing of construction traffic. However, Chairman, what we do try to do, and is referred to in this report, and I think Mrs Dunn is thumbing through to find the relevant condition number, is we are requiring a construction management plan, 16, thank you, Vice Chairman. We are requiring a construction management plan that will deal with such issues. So that matter is already addressed within the report. Just checking through the bits that I've referred to, Chairman. On the, I think probably the final point, Chairman, the issue of reviewing the house types through Open. Open would not normally concern themselves with a development of this scale. They do advocate design reviews. We would seek to do that internally using a source of various skills, either within our own team or within the council, and a condition of that nature, in my view, Chairman, would not satisfy the test set out in the National Planning Policy Framework. Clearly, the reserved matters will come in, they will be subject to consultation, there will be the opportunity for residents and councillors to comment on those designs. But we will obviously ourselves be seeking to achieve the highest design that we can on this and other sites within the borough. I think, Chairman, is there any points? Oh, Chairman, yes, the issue about the bridge. We've negotiated some safeguarded land in the bottom southwest corner of the site. Excuse me, southeast corner of the site. That would potentially link in with one of the other Part 2 sites on the opposite side of the railway line. The issue with linking in the south-western corner is that the land opposite is in use as playing fields, and any bridge landing on that land could potentially compromise the use of those playing fields. So we've gone with what we consider to be the best option. Clearly this scheme, again, of this scale, cannot be expected to deliver the footbridge itself, but the land is safeguarded for a potential route of that footbridge should the funding at any point come forward in the future. I think that's covered it, Chairman. Yeah, thank you.
Right, well thank you Mr Pegram for that. I think we have covered a lot there. So we now get to the point where we start discussion amongst the committee. So who would like to make any comments, questions, queries? Councillor Thurman.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, this site does sit obviously within the green belt, but it fits very tidily and neatly with a clean edge to the outer side of the village. The other thing, I would be quite happy to go along with Councillor Upton's proposals, and I would be inclined to agree with him that another access onto this site for an amount of 400 houses would particularly be of benefit. I would also like to know about the school and the medical centre, to be quite certain that the 106 commitment would be usable elsewhere should it not go ahead on this site. And presumably if it did not go ahead on this site, they would put in for more housing, I imagine. But I would like to know that the 106 is safeguarded for use in another area. I mean, I think this is a long, long way out of the centre of the village. I think it need to be safeguarded for use on another site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we did have word that it is a safeguarded site and all options are open, and attempts will be made for either to improve existing facilities or somewhere else within the village centre. But perhaps we can just clarify that, and also the point about the access. I know there has been mention of comments about possible second access to that site.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, we have not got the final wording of the Section 106. You have the heads of terms table at the back of the report. That details on page 88, going over to 89, the health provision. You'll see that this development actually generates a potential maximum contribution of £368,000. That's based on the formulaic approach used by the CCG, £920 per two-bed property and £600 per one-bed property. So that £368,000 is calculated assuming the maximum 400 dwellings on the site and all being two-bedroom. In addition to that, Chairman, the developer is offering the two sites, which give the Borough Council and the CCG and the Education Authority flexibility and options. As I say, we are still ongoing discussions with regard to potential provision of a health facility elsewhere in the village, and we will continue those discussions, no doubt, as we move forward with other applications. However, this gives you, as local planning authority chairman, the flexibility that should those negotiations fail, that the full contribution would be provided along with a site on this site to deliver a centre here if absolutely necessary. It also gives the flexibility that if it's provided elsewhere, we still get the £368,000 maximum maximum of £368,000 contribution to be spent elsewhere within the village. So, if you like, it's the best of both worlds to a certain extent. We've got the option, should it be necessary, to provide it on this site. But as I say, that is, if you like, last resort, final option as far as we're concerned. In terms of the access, Chairman, the site has a single point of access. That is considered to be adequate as far as I understand it. I'm clearly not a highway engineer or a transport planner, but we have consulted the highway engineers. The servicing of this site by a single access is possible, technically, through the provision of a roundabout. Clearly, if it was only a T-junction or something of that nature, then that would not be desirable. This is achievable by the delivery of a roundabout. In terms of the possible alternative access, Chairman, what I would paint a picture for you, or a scenario, is that if there were two accesses, residents would potentially have the choice of either access. Now, clearly, the proposed access that we've been presented with for Grooms Cottage is capable of dealing with 55 dwellings. If that were to be opened up to the whole of this site as well, you would then potentially have 455 dwellings going out, worst case scenario, admittedly, through what would then be a substandard access. So, to a certain extent, the scheme you have before you is designed as the best technical solution. If I can just maybe indicate, or Mrs. Dunn can indicate, the width of the road would be wider up to the point where on the application site, Michelle, on the application site, so it would come in, I think, at 6.75 metres to a point where the roads within the site would split. No, it was more the other one. So effectively, if there was an accident or breakdown on that entrance, there would still be sufficient width, as I understand it, Chairman, for vehicles to pass. And then the roads beyond the point where it splits into two roads would obviously become narrower, because you then have options of looping round the estate. But that is the technical response, or the textbook response, if you like, as to why a second access into this site through the Grooms Cottage site would not be appropriate. And just to pick up on one final point that Councillor Thurman raised, the Section 106 would be termed so that if the school site and the health centre site were not required after the specified periods, they would revert back to the developer, and clearly that would give the developer the option, subject to satisfying technical requirements, to perhaps provide additional housing on the site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. Was that helpful, Councillor Thurman?
Thank you.
Right. Now, who's coming up next on this? Oh, sorry, Councillor Stockwood.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. One of the points that was raised within the speakers speaking was about bungalows, and I would just like to ask for clarification whether condition 31, which seeks to secure that the development is developed according to the neighbourhood plan, housing mix and density, will actually provide some bungalows, which, as I think is in the neighbourhood plan policy. Yep. It's actually 16.V111 is the hours of operation. So I do think there is a condition for the construction method statement, hours of operation, which is specifically requested. Number 14, condition-wise, is I think the landscaping opportunities, and that the housing mix, the distribution of the affordable housing, and the landscaping are issues that can come forward through design with reserved matters, because this is just an outlined application at the current time. The other matter that I would like further clarification on was the possibility of moving the footbridge to the southwest, and whether or not there was any points to be made on that. However, I think it's been very clearly reiterated that the health centre and primary school are only there if the central locations that most people want are not successful. And I think it's very important that although we are adapting the condition to give the health centre 6 years now to make plans for their current site, it would be very important that the town has an alternative if the central locations don't work out. But I have a couple of points I'd like answers to on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwood. So, query about the type of houses, in particular bungalows, and how it accords to the neighbourhood plan, and also reference to the various conditions.
Thank you, Chairman. Throat's starting to go already, Chairman. It's a long meeting. Yeah, in terms of the issue of bungalows and housing mix, clearly we will seek to ensure where possible that the housing mix that comes forward satisfies not only the requirements of our strategic housing manager, but also where possible the neighbourhood plan. I say as close as possible, Chairman. We have seen from other examples elsewhere in the borough that they are never quite spot on. And the other caution I would give is that the mix that is specified in the neighbourhood plan, as I understand it, is based on a housing needs survey prepared at a given time. And clearly this is a development which will take 7, 8 years perhaps to build out, depending on housing market, etc. And the housing needs during that time will undoubtedly change. So, as I say, a lot of the time the housing delivered, the mix, is a reaction to the market as well as housing needs. However, Chairman, we will seek to ensure, and you'll see that in paragraph 130 of the report on page 38, our strategic housing officer is asking for bungalows as part of the affordable housing breakdown. Just in terms, I think the other point that Councillor Stockwood raised was with regard to the bridge over the railway line. I did address that in part. If I go into a bit more detail, Chairman, my understanding is that a bridge over that railway line would require a clearance of something like 6 metres over the railway line, and with a 1 in 20 ramp to be DDA compliant, would result in quite a long ramp or curly ramp off the top of that bridge, which would take up quite a significant amount of space. And as I said previously, our view is that that would potentially compromise the use of the playing pitches and the playing fields on the other site to the southwestern end of the site. Hence, we've gone with the potential option of landing it on the site to the south of the railway line, which is another local plan Part 2 site. And clearly, when that site comes forward for negotiations and discussions, if it hasn't already come forward, we will have similar discussions with that applicant about safeguarding a site on that area to land the bridge on that side of the railway line. hopefully that clarifies the point.
Is that helpful? Yes. My next name on the list is Councillor Mayles, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've noticed that the observations from the local councillors, they do not object but have reservations, and I'm sure those reservations are currently being talked about. Paragraph 13, C, housing land supply. It's an acute housing land supply shortage in the borough, and Ratcliffe specifically. Is up to 400 new dwellings on the application south would make a valuable contribution, and I'm sure we all acknowledge that that is so. The footbridge that you were talking about, and a playing field near it and over a railway line, they do not seem to go together to me, and I do hope that when we come to discuss it in the future that there will be some safeguard. Also on paragraph 10 you talk about a buffer. I'm pleased to see that you'll be looking into the hedgerows and having this buffer along the edge, and I'm sure yet again in a future meeting we shall be discussing that. So who's going to maintain it and things like that. Anyway, for the time being, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mayles. Do you want to add anything there? The points again being it's very much an outline application.
Just to pick up on the point that Councillor Mayles made, the open space areas, as we understand it, would be managed by a management company subject to a service charge on the housing. And she did remind me of one further point that I intended to make following the initial speaker's chairman, about the weight to be given to the neighbourhood plan, which is part of the development plan for this area, and to the emerging part 2. Now, clearly, as the neighbourhood plan is part of the development plan, it carries the full weight of a development plan document. Clearly, when the core strategy was produced, we were looking at minimum 400 houses. The neighbourhood plan is based on delivering those 400 houses across multiple sites. Clearly, now that we are looking to increase numbers in Radcliffe-on-Trent to 920, this site, in our view, does not conflict with that emerging position and provides a majority of the housing, or certainly a large proportion of the housing, on a single site in this location. So it is a case, Chairman, of applying the planning balance, as we often say, and members will have to, for themselves, give that consideration the appropriate weight in determining this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mayles. Councillor Hull, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just two items. The 30% affordable housing, I'm pleased to hear that Mr Pegram has assured us that that is going to stick. As we know in Bingham, the number of developments we've had in Bingham where it starts off at a very, very nice figure but doesn't end up that way through various reasons. So I do hope that by the time we get through this that their 30% does stick. Second point, it's about the traffic really. I applaud the roundabout. Yes, looks very good, and I'm sure that is the best way to get people in and out of the main development. What I'm concerned about is the people who are going to buy houses in this area who then go to Shelford to get to Gunthorpe Bridge, to go over the river, to get into Nottingham via Loudon. Plus, the people who turn left go into the village. Now, Shelford Road is a very, very busy road, and there's a little mini roundabout at the bottom, which gets congested at the best of times, particularly as there's a 10-minute bus service coming from Bingham down through the village of Radcliffe. And I think the congestion on Shelford Road and on Main Road, will be horrendous. Speaking as a representative from Bingham, the A52 is a nightmare. If you try and get into Nottingham in a car or on the bus between 7:30 and 9:30 in the morning, the thought of more cars coming down. Luckily for me, as far as the A52 is, they're not actually going onto the A52, but they will end up on the A52 at the RSPCA. So yes, there's traffic lights. Yes, they've changed the alteration of the timing of the lights. and there are more cars able to get from Radcliffe onto the A52 just to get into the traffic jam at Gamston Island. So my concerns really are that I don't think the highways have really looked at this. What we've been calling for in Bingham for a long time is an assessment of the whole area, not just the brand new A46, lovely trunk road we've got now, but the cars that come off that to get onto the A52, to get into Nottingham, absolute gridlock. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hull. So Councillor Hull notes and is encouraged by the 30% affordable housing commitment, and just wants to be assured that commitment is a commitment. And the traffic worries quite in favour of the roundabout, but worried about Shelford Road and both directions, Gunthorpe and towards the A52. We're very much in the hands of highway planners on this one, I suspect, but could you help us out with that one, please?
Chairman, not wanting to provoke groans, but you know my standard phrase at this time. Highways Authority and Highways England do not object to this application. Just in terms of a couple of issues, Chairman, you'll see that on page 90 and 91 of the report in the heads of terms table, there are numerous contributions for improvements to road and public transport issues. If I just pick up a few of them, there's £260,000 required for traffic management, traffic calming scheme measures on Shelford Road. There is a £427,939 contribution towards the Memorandum of Understanding with the Highways England, which is for the delivery of improvements along the A52 corridor. I think when this application, it wasn't envisaged that there would be a need for that contribution. There's already been some improvements to the Nottingham Road and the Bingham Road junctions. However, this application would make a further contribution to improvements along the A52 corridor. In terms of the impact on the wider transport network, Chairman, I did speak with our planning policy manager, and Highway Authority colleagues have confirmed that the impact of growth within Rushcliffe, that's not just this site, but other sites in Radcliffe and in other villages, the impact of growth within Rushcliffe has been examined through the local plan part 2 process and indeed the core strategy process, and it has been determined that the impacts would not be severe on the highway network. In fact, the suggestion, I can only say what the studies say, Chairman, the suggestion is that it's a case of human nature. People will find routes, and the congestion will certainly not be significantly worse as a result of any growth within the Rushcliffe area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram, and those are not, as Mr. Pegram's just said, they're not comments from the authority. These are comments from the professionals and experts out there, and we have to take on board advice. Right, Councillor Mallender, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions. First of all, as far as the planting is concerned, several of the local councillors, including Councillor Upton, in his presentation, have mentioned that they would like to see some more planting to be around the site where there are houses, so that the new site and the current houses are somewhat separated by some planting. And also, you say, oh, the cursor's just in the right place. Is that an access point? I can't quite make out what happens with that road there. But if it isn't an access point, then I note that there appears to be a break in the hedgerow there. Now, one of the things that happens with wildlife is that they need a corridor. You can't have a break in it, that won't help. So if there's a road there, but it doesn't seem to lead anywhere, then I think that needs to be, the hedgerow needs to be concurrent with the edge of Plumber Drive. Also, the local councillors seem to be concerned that there should be, if we are going to solve the traffic problem, then we need to get people to use means other than the car to move about. So several people have mentioned that there should be some provision from the developer to improve the railway car park so that the train service is used more frequently. And in my opinion, and this appears to be the opinion of Councillor Upton, putting the foot and cycle bridge in the south-east corner is actually not going to encourage people to use the railway to cycle there, because I would have thought that going at the other end is not as far to cycle. I'm not quite sure where the footbridge is supposed to lead to in the south-east corner. If it was in the south-west, then it would be easier to access the railway line, and it would be also easier to access for young people those playing fields. And I think that is an important thing, that you're making the young people go a long way round to access the playing field. So actually, I think the footbridge would be better in the south east corner, west corner, sorry. I was a bit confused by the comment about the 30% affordable housing when the development is gradual. So I assume that what was meant there is that what's going to happen is there's going to be applications that are coming to us in future, which are going to be for smaller numbers of houses on this site. Do you mean, but you also said that there would be a peppering of the affordable houses. So does that mean that each of those applications will have to be 30% affordable? I think that would be the best way to go. Otherwise, we might end up with them all being in the same place, which is a bad thing. And I'm sure we should really have a condition to say that some of them, at least, particularly the affordable homes, are bungalows, because that is very much needed. And finally, I noticed that there's a contribution to a crossing. And I just asked that since we're trying to encourage cycling, that should be a toucan crossing rather than a zebra or a pelican. I know it's not on this site, but it's a contribution towards it somewhere else. And I think, if we're trying to encourage cycling and people to go to the railway station on their bikes and then commute into Nottingham or wherever they're going, then it needs to be a toucan crossing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender. I'm sure I'll be put right on this, but the type of crossing, whether it's toucan or pedestrian or whatever, that's more of a decision for when it comes to if it comes to a detailed planning application, I suspect. But and also your point about the planting. Paragraph 14, I think, is quite helpful in that respect. But anyway, the other points about there's mystery about the other. Mystery about the other access and comments about the railway, the car parking in the railway car park, and the position of any potential bridge or bungalows again, which we mentioned before.
I won't repeat the comments about bungalows, Chairman. I think I made that clear earlier when I addressed the committee. In terms of the comments about this framework plan, it is a framework plan. It's a rough guide to the distribution of sort of buildings throughout the site. Clearly, it does fix the point of the safeguarded, reserved, call it what you like, school and health centre site. I certainly don't think there's any intention to provide pedestrian or vehicle access through there, certainly not at this time. That would require obtaining or gaining control over properties in this area. This is indicative of the landscaping. Landscaping is a reserved matter, so the full details will come forward at a later date. And obviously, I think the issue to point out here, Chairman, is this site is an arable farm use. There's not very many trees on the site. And in terms of the aspirations of this council to increase tree cover through developments and other means, this site will make a significant net gain in terms of the number of trees that are currently on the site. In terms of the phasing of the affordable housing, this is not a situation where the affordable housing is front-loaded, back-loaded, middle-loaded or whatever. The Section 106 agreement, heads of terms that we've agreed so far with the developer, would require 30% affordable housing in each phase. So it's not, as I say, each phase would be expected to deliver that 30%. Clearly, Chairman, I did say earlier it would be fixed. And that will come back to haunt me. The issue is clearly if there is a viability issue that occurs due to a crash in the housing market or something in the future, I would never say never, but certainly at this stage, the Section 106 agreement is phrased in such a way that it's 30% per phase, so it will be 30% across the whole development. And yes, we will seek to ensure that that's pepper potted through the development and not clustered or we would like to ensure it's tenure blind. In terms of the improvements to the railway station, Chairman, we want to encourage people to use the railway. We want to discourage people from using the car as their prime option. Clearly, if we provided loads of car parking at the station, they would jump in their car at this site, drive down to the station and park at the station. What we want to encourage is walking and cycling to the station, hence the contribution to improve the cycle parking provision at the station. And that, in terms of sustainable transport, is considered to be the... Oh, excuse me. Thought I had a technical crash then, Chairman. That is considered to be the sustainable transport response. Textbook maybe, but that is the response we will give you. In terms of the Toucan crossing decision, that's not for me as a mere planner to make, Chairman. That will be a decision which the County Council will decide on when they have their final approval of details through the Section 278 process. And they will decide upon the most appropriate crossing when they decide upon the precise location and how it's to be used. So it's not to be fixed at this stage through the planning application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Pegram. Councillor Purdue-Horan, please.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I address my remarks as a town councillor, not far from Radcliffe. There are a number of us also town and parish councillors on this committee, and this particular application is very similar to many others that this committee has looked at in the past. It has its individual issues, but broadly, you know, the scenario is we are fairly familiar with this type of outline planning application. And I want to address my remarks particularly for this site. But just before I do that, last week I was at a conference and whilst the main hall was mainly empty during most of the week, you could not get into the fringe meetings. And there was two subjects being spoken about. One was of a more international flavour, Brexit, but the other equally important item was housing. It was standing room only at every fringe meeting about housing. And the housing ministers who attended those fringe meetings were practically foaming at the mouth at the prospect of authorising more housing throughout the country. That is the scenario that we are facing. MPs of all sides are receiving pleas and visits from constituents about the lack of housing in this country. So it's considered now we have a housing crisis, which has been a narrative that has built up over a number of years. I, as a town councillor, I'm very keen that local decisions and local influence is maximised. And there is a possibility, and we've seen it, of course, on a number of occasions, where if we object to this planning application, we will lose control because it may, and there is a risk, it may go to appeal. And it is taken completely out of local control and influence to elsewhere. Mr. Chairman, the the existence of a neighbourhood plan is very important to me. And I listened very carefully to the remarks made this evening and the comments in the report, and particularly of Radcliffe Parish Council and the local borough ward councillors. And there are issues, and clearly they are not all, and we know they haven't all been addressed tonight, because, as Mr. Pegram has alluded to, this will take a number of years. There is clearly a lot of discussions to be held locally, and I want those discussions to be held as locally as possible, and for us to enable that if we can. And so, without dragging on, the point I'm making, Mr. Chairman, is yes, I accept there are issues. It's a greenbelt site and all that, and the various points that have been made very eloquently this evening. But on balance, I am probably going to myself approve this application to keep it within Rushcliffe, so that there is no goodwill lost between the applicant and local residents and their representatives, and that there can be discussions going forward to simply improve on the comments that have been made from local representatives. So, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, reluctantly maybe, but on balance, I will be moving this recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Purdue-Horan. Well, you make some very good points about the pressures on housing, whether we like it or not. It's a fact that the pressure is there, and the need is there as well. And your point about local decision making is, I think, absolutely spot on. And we have seen recently cases where it has been taken out of our hands. But so thank you for those comments. Is there anything you want to add to those?
No,
Probably nothing else to add to that. So you've moved the recommendation as per the report, but with the amended conditions that we've been discussing. Do you have a seconder for that, please? Oh, Councillor Bushman, right. Thank you very much. Do you want to add anything to?
Yes, I would like
yep.
to. There are many questions that are totally unanswered. There's the access, the roundabout, the health centre, the primary school. It goes on and on with regards to the amount of questions that need to be answered before a proper decision is made on this. And I do agree, and I do second the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Bushman. And again, what I think you're doing. Oh, just turn your microphone on. Thank you. I think what you're doing there is again making the point about still an early stage, being outlined and detailed decisions to come through. Right, we've had the recommendation moved and seconded, and with the conditions and amended as per the report earlier on, Mrs. Dunn's report. I think unless anyone else wants to say anything on this, I think we'd better go to a decision, because I hope you agree we've given it a lot of discussion and time. So with the recommendation as shown in the report and as discussed, better have a show of hands for those in favour of the report, please. Can you please show the show of hands? And anyone against? Right, so that's just confirm the numbers.
And we've got Councillor Smith on the back.
So it's
11.
Right, so that recommendation is passed and approved. But thank you all for your contributions, and there is still a long way to go with the application on this. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, there's quite a lot of people coming and going. We've been sitting here now for quite a long time. There's another big application coming up. Would you like to have a 5-minute comfort break? to stretch your legs. So it's just gone 8 o'clock now. Shall we aim to be back at 8:10? Please, thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's 8:10. And thank you for. I know that people will be, our guests, members of the public will be here for various different applications, but I hope you understand, as I said earlier, that we do have to discuss things in depth. So thank you for your patience with this. So we'll go on to our next application tonight, which is at Ruddington. This is, yes, here we are, get the right page. It's another outline planning application for a proposed development of 175 dwellings, including vehicular access via 75 Musters Road, pedestrian links, public open space, car parking, landscaping and drainage. So this is another outline application with further potential further details to follow. Ms Catlow, please, if you'd like to talk us through this.
Thank you, Chairman. There are a number of late representations which have been received in connection with this application, and they have been circulated to members before the meeting. Now, the site itself measures approximately 10 hectares and is located to the southwest of Ruddington. It is bordered to the north by the private rear garden areas of properties along Musters Road and Western Fields. To the south, beyond Asher Lane, is Rushcliffe Country Park. To the west is an informal footpath with a railway line beyond. And to the east, beyond this field here, is an area of allotments. And there's an area of allotments in this area here. Members will recall that a previous outline application for 175 houses on this site with access off Asher Lane was the subject of a public inquiry in April of this year. The appeal was subsequently allowed and planning permission was granted on the site for 175 houses, subject to a Section 106 and a number of conditions. The application under consideration this evening would comprise of the same number of dwellings as before. However, the access would be off Musters Road via number 75, which is in that location there. So I'll just take you through some photographs of the site and the surrounding area. These photographs were taken from the southwestern corner of the site, from the informal public footway, looking north towards Western Fields and Musters Road. Moving round to the south, that is the view from the same location towards the country park on the opposite side of Asher Lane. The next group of photographs, this is taken from Asher Lane with the application site on the right hand side beyond that hedgerow. Now these were taken from the southeast corner of the site with the allotments here beyond that hedge, and again properties along Musters Road in the background there. Now, in terms of access, there will be two possible routes to the site from the green in the centre of Ruddington. The first would be down Distillery Street, passing Malting Close and Buttery Gardens, and round south into Musters Road. Now, the property you see there in the centre of the photograph is number 75. And that would be the property that would require demolition in order to facilitate access into the site. Moving closer, again, that shows number 75 with one Western Fields on the right hand side. That's a closer shot there. And on the other side, this is number 73 Musters Road, and you can see there the side elevation of that property does have two windows which would face towards the proposed access road. Now, going back to the green, this would be the other alternative access into the site, down Asher Lane. and then turning right into Musters Road through the existing residential estate. Now this photograph is taken looking across the front garden area of number 75. The Musters Road coming down here and round the existing corner, and Western Fields is there. And this is from the opposite direction, standing on Western Fields, looking across the front of, you can just see the garage there in connection with number 75, looking towards Musters Road. In support of the application, the agents have submitted an indicative plan showing how the access arrangements could work. So this shows the priority would be from the north down Musters Road into the site. You can just see outlined there the existing property at number 75. Western Fields and the other arm of Musters Road would become junctions onto this main road here. Now the application is in outline form with all matters reserved. This is an indicative site layout plan showing how the site could be developed. As I've previously stated, the site itself does already have outline planning consent for the erection of 175 houses. Therefore, it is officers' view that the only matter for consideration is the acceptability of the revised vehicular access off Musters Road. Following the submission of the highway layout plan and a noise report to address the impact of road noise on the properties either side of the new access road, further consultations were carried out with the County Council as Highways Authority and the Borough Council's Environmental Health team. As a result of these consultations, no technical objections were raised to the new access, either on highway safety grounds or noise grounds, subject to conditions which are set out at the end of the report. Officers are therefore recommending that planning permission be granted, subject to those conditions and a Section 106 agreement, following the application's referral to the Planning Casework Unit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Catlow. Thank you very much. We have speakers on this item as well. We actually have 3 speakers. As you know, we have up to 5 minutes per speaker, but on this application, I've had a request from 2 members of the public to make their comments known to us. So they're going to, in effect, share their 5 minutes. So I think 3 minutes for one person and 2 minutes for the other person. So the 2 names I have on here are Michelle Foss and Mr. Lane. So Michelle first, and then Mr. Lane afterwards. And I assume you were here earlier and you saw how the clock everything works. So although we've changed it, we've got it back to how it used to be. So it is starting at 5 now, and we'll count down to 0. And it's the right-hand button. As soon as you're ready, the red light will come on when you're ready. Thank you.
Okay. May I start by saying that many people in Ruddington didn't want this housing development on Asher Lane at all. This is because of the future residents of the development having to drive through Ruddington to get to their homes. I'm here to represent Asher Lane and Barleyland, but have with me residents from the Green and Elms Park who feel that they will be affected by the increase of traffic. There are many reasons. Transport issues are all on page 106 of this agenda, but the traffic in the centre of Ruddington is absolutely chock-a-block from access to the country park. We have businesses up there, a livery stable, so horse boxes go through, trailers, farm equipment, there's a school buses, plus if the Rushcliffe Country Park has an event, people drive there to get to the two entrances on Asher Lane. So it all comes through the green, up where Distillery Street is, but down Asher Lane and, you know, past Mustard Road. It is a bottleneck. There are potential dangers for horse riders who use the village. Now there is a livery stable. They trot down Asher Lane, go round the village and stable their horses again. There is a heritage railway centre, two well-established allotments. People tend to drive. They don't walk, they don't live in the village, but they still have allotments. And they drive their dogs, all vehicles, school buses, lots and lots of different traffic issues, which just clog the centre of the high street. And for me personally, I was asked to keep this short and sweet. I'm known for being passionate and getting emotional, but I was born in Ruddington, have lived there all my life and already seen a lot of growth and development. The people of Ruddington are passionate about their heritage and village culture, which is disappearing before their very eyes. Ruddington is growing and becoming a town, and most people's homes are their life's work, so emotions are running high. As a nation, we embrace other cultures, but we seem to be letting our own heritage and culture dwindle away. So passion, emotion, heritage, village culture, people's homes, bricks and mortar, and life's hard work. Discussions made here affect us all in many, many ways.
We've hitched
not
3 minutes.
just that
Okay,
reason.
thank you. But
Thank you for listening.
You're welcome.
And thank you for your
understand
your
absolutely
time.
where you're coming from.
Thank
So
you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Lane, please. And you've got 2 minutes, and also I would just to if you I know as well you wrote to the committee as well, and I'd just confirm we did receive your letter. So as soon as you're ready, the clock will start counting down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are presently 215 existing houses on the Musters Road estate. The plan calls for an extra 175. That's an 80% increase. I understand that Musters Road was built in the 1960s when only 1 car per household was the norm. It is a relatively narrow road with 2 bad bends. My wife and I live at number 73, which obviously is next door to number 75, planned demolition. The proposed road into the Greenfield site would turn my property into a corner plot. There would be approaching 1,000 traffic movements per day, passing within feet of my lounge and bedroom window. The necessary 4-way junction outside my property would be on the severest bend and would be a recipe for a traffic disaster. The existing 4-way junction at the village green is very awkward and dangerous. There's a 200-yard stretch of road beyond the garage workshops where houses do not have any drives, meaning that cars are parked on the road, and this makes passage of only 1 vehicle. I've learned only tonight that this new access road, if it were passed, would be the only access into the site. Because Asher Lane is not an adopted road. I don't know if that is correct, but that's what I've heard tonight. I ask the committee to please vote against this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lane, and well done for sticking within the time limit as well. That's much appreciated.
Yes, I had to rewrite everything.
I understand, it's not easy, so
thank you very much.
Thank you. Could you just press the button? Lovely, thank you very much. And our next speaker on this is one of the local ward members, Councillor Buckle. So if you'd like to join us, please. and you have up to 5 minutes on this. I think you're probably speaking sort of on behalf of yourself, but also your colleagues, the other ward members as well. Right, as soon as you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, fellow councillors. I speak on behalf of my fellow Ruddington Borough councillors and myself. How does the corner of the village 3 miles from here find road capacity for the owners of 175 new houses? How does Ruddington's street layout, some say largely unchanged since the age of the horse and cart, look to inspired design to channel the flows of an anticipated 300 additional vehicles through narrow streets without deliberately creating a rat run of a route? How can the amenity and site access wishes of residents on one side of the new development be fairly and equitably balanced against the amenity and site access wishes of residents on the other side of the development? Let me start by saying I've followed the various iterations of this planning application for the development of Asher Lane site for some time now. I attended the 4-day public inquiry in April, and I have listened to the points of view and lobbying by Ruddington's residents. Yes, and I note that 773 objections from local residents have all contributed to the weight of this evening's business. The 3 key points I would like to make are these. For my first point, I call it confusion out of clarity. Yes, confusion out of clarity. This references Para 12 and others in the committee report. At the public inquiry, we witnessed the exhaustive and detailed steps taken by the planning inspector at the beginning of the hearing to properly clarify exactly what access the applicant wanted. Was it from Asher Lane or was it from Musters Road? There had been months and months of preparations leading up to the public inquiry, and all the time available to prepare and prepare and prepare for the inquiry. At the inquiry, it took the best part of a painstaking hour for a definitive position to be stated by the applicant. Specifically, the planning inspector was told by the applicant that access would be required from Asher Lane and access would not be required from Musters Road. That was the settled position. It really was as clear as that. The enormous significance of this point is the planning inspector then proceeded with the inquiry on the undertaking given by the applicant. This meant that the public inquiry was denied the opportunity to scrutinise the implications of access from Musters Road. So that is why I say confusion out of clarity. Moving on, my second point is about the unresolved compromised safety. This references Paras 9, 39 and others. I have received a number of representations from close proximity residents suggesting that the access to the site be permitted from both Asher Lane and from Musters Road. I believe the proximity to Western Fields and the increased risk of collisions referenced in Para 39 have still not been adequately addressed. Moving on, which brings me to my third point. Environmental health is referenced in Para 50 and others in the reports and pack. The anticipated noise impacts of the road traffic. By way of a condition, I ask what thoughtful and magnanimous consideration might the applicant make to demonstrate willingness to recognise the impacts the traffic will have on long-standing residents. For example, several residents have contacted me. These are people who would be most directly affected by the traffic, and they tell me of their fears for the impending blight on their lives. I do believe there is the opportunity for constructive help to be given to those residents whose amenity will be compromised by the most, including those making late representation this evening, regarding practical support to upgrade their homes with acoustic glazing and other such noise mitigation arrangements. In conclusion, I know this evening's deliberations are not about considering the logical and very sensible suggestions made by many to open up a high-volume route to the A60 along the so-called perimeter road. That would require a consent from the ultimate owner of the roadway, which I understand to be Nottinghamshire County Council. Whichever way my fellow councillors vote this evening, I am sure they will be particularly aware that we want the impacts, and I do stress impacts, of Rushcliffe's new large-scale housing developments like this one to be recognised as considered and considerate. So in summary, my objection to this application this evening is that a single access and exit point on Musters Road is inadequate, compromises safety, and has not yet been scrutinised to the exacting standards demanded by a public inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckle, and again, well done for being within the time. Right, so we heard from Mrs. Foss, who told us, pointed out that many in Ruddington didn't want the development in the first place, but of course, as indeed this council didn't at the very beginning, but we are where we are with permission that has been granted for the houses. So all we're talking about tonight really is the proposed access. Mr. Lane explained to us the pressures and the worries for residents of Musters Road in particular, and also the potential four-way junction worries, along with on-road parking that happens on Musters Road and nearby roads. And Councillor Buckle has confirmed the comments about Ruddington, the worries about the road, the rat run, etc., and also he referred to confusion out of clarity debate. So, so Mr. Pegram, are you picking up this, please?
Chairman, if I can pick up on this confusion out of clarity issue to start with. The first application was submitted in, well, actually there was not the first application, there was one for 250 houses on this site that was withdrawn. The application that was considered in 2016 on this site was for 175 houses, and in that application the applicant had outlined Asher Lane in red as part of the application site back to the public highway. This little nib of the site didn't feature in that application. That application was refused by your officers, I think under delegated powers, on the basis that it was in the Greenbelt, it was Greenbelt land, and we considered, along with our colleagues in the Highway Authority, that the development would lead to significant adverse impacts on the highway network within Ruddington. That was the subject of the public inquiry. Now, obviously, the inspector can only consider effectively what is before him as part of the application that was refused permission. Councillor Buckle makes the point that this alternative access was not the subject of scrutiny at that inquiry, and I think it would be fair to say that had it have been, I think we would have lodged a claim for costs against the developer because we had not had the opportunity as local planning authority, and the Highway Authority had not had the opportunity to scrutinise that alternative access. Therefore, the point of clarification that the inspector sought at the beginning of the inquiry and made clear was he was considering the appeal based on the application as originally submitted, that 2016 application for access off of Asher Lane. This application came in during the course of that appeal and to some extent muddied the waters to some extent. So that was the issue over clarification. The position we are now in, Chairman, is clearly we have now had the opportunity as part of this application, along with our colleagues in the Highway Authority, to consider and scrutinise the access arrangements. Dare I say that this arrangement would only have the opportunity to be scrutinised by a government inspector if this committee tonight refuse permission to this application. However, Chairman, that comes with a warning, and that is the fact that the Highway Authority do not object to this application. If you were minded to refuse permission on highway safety grounds, you would not have the support of your technical consultee. This is an outline application. Access is reserved. However, we've had a lot of information submitted. It's quite clear to me from this plan that the intention is to provide access through number 73, and they've 75. Do apologise, number 73, Mr. Lane. Through 75, and they've provided a preliminary drawing to demonstrate how that could potentially be achieved. If I can be a little bit corny, Chairman, all roads lead to Ruddington. Effectively, whether access is from Asher Lane or whether it's from this point here as now proposed, everything would effectively come to that point at the green on into the village. So the issue of traffic congestion and impact on the highway network within the village has already been considered and scrutinised by the inspector. All we are now looking at effectively is the alternative access arrangement, which would put traffic out onto Musters Road, giving residents two options, either, and the preferred option from the Highway Authority's point of view, is either the priority route up through Musters Road, ending up at the Green, or along this leg of Musters Road and then up Asher Lane, ending up at the Green. So, as I say, Chairman, this site does have outline planning permission. That is still extant. That is a fallback position, which in my opinion, Chairman, carries significant weight in the determination of this application. Members should restrict their, in my view, their debate to the impact of that access on the amenity of neighbouring properties and on the highway safety in this immediate area. Issues of greenbelt have already been dealt with by the inspector. The inspector was satisfied that there were very special circumstances which outweighed the harm to the greenbelt. That issue has already been debated quite thoroughly, Chairman. Just to look at the other points, if I go to, just to reiterate Mr. Catlow's points, the revised access arrangement has been subject to consultation with the Highway Authority and the environmental health officers. That is the preliminary proposals. I say preliminary because this is an outline application with access reserved. But you can see that what was referred to by one speaker as a dangerous bend is in fact changed into a four-way junction, providing give way to Westfield Road and also Western Fields. Sorry, Chairman, Western Fields. I've got my glasses. That's better. No, and to this leg of Musters Road. And you can see that that's the outline of the existing property, number 75. That's the edge of number 73 that you saw in the photographs. So the proposal, if you can make out through the lines just to help you there, is that's the position of the footway down through that road area. And there is the opportunity to provide a buffer landscaped area to the side there. Chairman, I won't pretend to say, no, it's not going to change the living environment of that property. It is a change to that property. It's a change to number one as well. The assessment that we have had to undertake, and you as decision makers will have to undertake, is, yes, it's a change, but is that change so significant that the impacts warrant refusal of planning permission? I'll leave it with you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pegram. Well, we can open up to discussion and debate now, but as we've said a few times this evening, whether we like it or not, permission is in place for the houses. So we can't do anything about that. The permission is there for the houses. And as we've heard, there was a very long drawn out application that came to where we are now. What we're looking at tonight is the proposed access from Musters Road and the creation of the junction and the changes. So, who would like to start on this, please? Councillor Manager. Sorry, I thought you were
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I thought you were indicating. So I'm terribly sorry. Councillor Stockwood.
I can see that the application comes with some conditions, and I understand that the existing position is the product of the inspector's actions, which I believe the phrase means we are where we are. What I'm particularly concerned on is the relationship between the access, which I understand is a reserved matter, and the property at number 73, Musters Road. I can see that there is a condition that says there will be 2 metre high acoustic fencing, and that there will be some. You've talked about the possibility of a landscape buffer. Would there be any? Would it be possible to enhance the conditions of the application to make it more specific? That we're very much minded to ensure that there is that landscape buffer and 2 metre high acoustic fence at that location, rather than the general statements that are currently included within the recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwood. Sorry about the confusion there. Can we give some assurance or answers on the position, please?
Yes, Chairman, certainly can. Just, if I'm not sure which is the best image to zoom in on for this, bear with me just 1 second, Chairman. No, not one. Sorry about the quality now, because it's obviously a little bit fuzzy. Basically, Chairman, condition 14 on page 121 details the measures which are intended to provide or safeguard the amenities of number, or both properties actually, either side of the access. I would stress that this is outlined with access to be considered. However, Chairman, we have got the noise report, and the specification in that noise report is an acoustic fence which runs roughly from that point. Oh no, sorry, from that point down the side boundary of number 73, and then across the back here, and on the other side. The fence would run roughly, bear with me just 1 second, from that point down the boundary and across to somewhere around that point there. So that condition, number 14, requires that fencing to be carried out in accordance with the acoustic survey that was submitted as part of the supporting evidence for the application. Clearly, Chairman, when the reserved matters come in, the reserved matters will need to be compliant with the outline, and although access is reserved and we only have a preliminary plan at this stage, it's obvious to me, it seems obvious to me, Chairman, that the access details will have to be closely aligned to that situation that you saw in the preliminary plan, but the acoustic fencing will have to be in accordance with this document, which puts the fencing on the boundary with those two properties. In addition to that, you then have the sort of set off away from the boundary from number 73 with the potential for landscaping, which again is a reserved matter. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. Councillor Thurman.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like a little bit of clarification on this, because it is rather confusing, the fact that the heading for the whole thing is proposes vehicular access via 75 Musters Road. Now, in paragraph, on page 115, on paragraph 105, it says, with regard to the demolition of 75 Musters Road, this is not included in the description of the application. My next point is the fact that the inspector was happy to pass this site as a housing for housing with the existing access from Asher Lane. I can't understand what the problem is there. My third point is the fact that this, I've just counted on there, and this development will back up to at least 27 properties in any event. And I think we do have to look at ourselves as a planning committee, that we do have to give some protection of some kind to existing residents. Or at least that's one of my thing, and I'd like a few clarification on those points, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thurman. Can we have some explanation about the demolition, and what's the issue about Asher Lane access and backing up to other properties?
Yes, Chairman, if I take that latter point first, really, just to reiterate, this development already has outline planning permission, so there is already approval for a development that will back on to or be adjacent to 27 properties. What we are effectively talking about here is a change in access arrangements to the site. It is an outline application. The description is somewhat detailed for an outline application, because a lot of those matters will be dealt with or considered at the reserved matters stage, including access. Bit of a technical point, Chairman, but the issue here is that whenever we get a planning application, the application site has to be outlined in red. This is actually our plan, this isn't the applicant's plan, but the site has to be outlined in red, and that red line has to link back to a public highway. This part of Asher Lane is not a public highway, it's not adopted, and therefore on the previous application, as I mentioned, that was outlined in red back to the public highway. This one is obviously outlined in red back to Musters Road, so there's a clear indication the intention is to provide access off of Musters Road from this application. In terms of why, clearly, Chairman, the applicant is entitled to put in an application. We are under a duty to consider that application. I would hazard a guess although this should not necessarily influence members' decision, but clearly there is a significant cost involved in upgrading the length of Asher Lane from, I think there was 2 access points proposed. There's a significant cost in upgrading that road back to the junction. Viability is a planning consideration, Chairman, so we have to be mindful that sites have to be deliverable. The developer is operating a business, he has to make a profit. Clearly, this is a more economical option for him to provide access onto Musters Road. However, Chairman, I did say that that should not influence your decision. You should not give that issue significant weight. The profits of the developer are not the consideration or concern of this council. It is a concern of this council that this site is deliverable and viable, but the alternative access arrangements have been scrutinised by officers and by the Highway Authority and have been found to be acceptable. Clearly, the inspector considers the impacts on the wider highway network, and those aspects are matters which I would suggest, Chairman, respectfully, that you are not really entitled, but should not revisit, because clearly that has been scrutinised. If we were to refuse permission on those grounds, that could lead to an award of costs potentially. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. But again, as we learn, we must just make decisions on the application and what potential impact, etc. Councillor Purdue-Horan, I think you indicated.
It's unfortunate, and thank you for Mr. Pegram clarifying those issues. It is unfortunate that actually perhaps even the inspector muddied the waters by almost entertaining discussion about alternative access. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult to look at this application without accepting that it's just simply a change to create a new access from what has already passed. And if we look at the green, you know, that has been settled by the inspector's decision. You know, the difficulties around the green is irrelevant now, because, you know, that was dealt with. My difficulty is, do we have a duty to consider this narrow access, which actually won't just affect number 73 and number 1 Western Fields? As Councillor Thurman said, there's a whole row of houses along Western Fields and Musters Road, but there is a massive impact also on other properties, both sides of Musters Road, at the southern end and at the northern end. And therefore, is this application, given that it's already got planning permission per se, but with a different access, by changing the access, does it actually create such an impact and lower the quality of life of those residents on Musters Road and some on Western Fields that it's acceptable or unacceptable to this committee? For me, I think it's unacceptable, and I'm not making that on the unfortunate residents of number 73 and number 1, whose lives will be severely impacted upon this change, but dozens of properties and the residents in those properties as a result of these changes. I'm not going to argue against what looks to me as quite a complicated new junction. I'm sure the Highways Authority are experts enough to reduce the possibility of any disasters. To me, it's the impact on the residents simply from that narrow access and egress. So I shall be, well, I either propose that we do not accept the recommendation, or I'll be voting against it. So whatever you wish to play.
You need to be you need to be clear, and if you are proposing a refusal, you would need to be clear on reasons.
That it is of such an impact to the residents to be unacceptable.
Yes, you need to be a little bit more specific as to. We have to be clear. If you're putting a counter argument, you have to be clear what those. Well, Mr. Pegram, can you?
Chairman, if I can provide some clarification, perhaps. You do not have any objection from your highway authority, although I don't think that's the route you're going down. As far as I interpret, you are more concerned about noise and disturbance to residents.
Clearly, the traffic generated going through that new access on the surrounding roads and the residents, the new residents affected. Exactly, noise, traffic.
So we're talking about
of such an impact.
The immediate environs of the access, but also wider, further afield.
Going right up towards the green, but not the green.
And Distillery Street. Yeah, and along Musters Road, Distillery Street.
Chairman, just to give you some guidance on that issue, and clearly we've discussed this before, members are the decision, or this committee in this instance is the decision-making body. If it's unless it's a positive recommendation, and then it has to go to the National Planning Casework Unit. But effectively, you have the comments from your environmental health officers. They are the technical consultees on this issue. Those comments are supported by an acoustic report, and which proposes as part of that mitigation measures to the impact on the immediate neighbouring residents. Clearly, Chairman, if members were minded to refuse permission on that basis, the Borough Council would have to provide objective evidence to support that reason for refusal. At this time, we do not have the support of the technical consultees. The technical consultees are satisfied with the measures that are being proposed to safeguard the amenities of those neighbouring properties. So clearly, we would have to provide some other form of evidence, potentially to support any such reason for refusal, which could prove difficult, Chairman, and dare I say again, we would find that challenging and possibly in a weak position in terms of potential award of costs. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. Do you want to come back on that, or do you want to think?
I take those points, and I accept the efforts made by the environmental health officer to mitigate the impact on the two immediate neighbours, but whether that is acceptable or not is something else. But neither is it in the report that there's any evidence that any traffic impact assessment has been made on the new route that I spotted.
Chairman, I'm getting a nod from my highway colleagues that the traffic impact was assessed. Clearly, the original assessment was based on the access from Asher Lane, looking at the impacts wider, further afield. This alternative has also been assessed through a traffic impact assessment and has been found to be acceptable. Clearly, the traffic impact assessment looks at highway safety matters, not amenity matters. But in terms of highway safety, in fact, the roads are considered to be acceptable. The access width at this point is 5.5 metres. That is sufficient to serve 50 to 400 dwellings. In terms of the access through over number 75, the width of the plot is in fact 18 metres. Requirement for a 6-metre carriageway with two 2-metre footways, one on either side, leaves you with a balance of 8 metres. And I think what the applicant has sought to do here is acknowledge the fact that in the side of, is that number 7? Is that number 1? That's number 1, yeah. So in the side of number 1, there are no windows, and that's a garage immediately adjacent to the boundary. Whereas at 73, sorry, Chairman, 73, there are some windows, and effectively they've given a greater distance on that side on this diagram, recognising there's a potential impact on number 73. The other aspect, Chairman, that has been drawn to my attention, paragraph 102, page 114, in fact, the conclusion is that the proposal would not have an unacceptable impact on a residential amenity, but the developers are nevertheless still willing to provide that acoustic fencing as an additional measure to protect the amenities of those properties. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. Hope that's helpful. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you. Yes, I do want to speak now because I have now done a little bit of research. Thank you to the internet. I fully agree with Councillor Purdue-Horan about that this is completely unacceptable for the people living on that residential road. Absolutely ridiculous to demolish a house and put a road into quite a large development that runs onto a very residential into a residential area. There's one way, however, that I will accept this development. I'd like to refer you to paragraph 41 from Nottinghamshire County Council Travel and Transport. I believe once someone said the law is an ass. I certainly think that the people that have written this, what they haven't ever done, clearly, is got on a bus. Because it refers to bus number 863. I've just looked at bus 863. Do you know how many buses there are a day? There are 3 buses a day, and the last one is at 1:40 in the afternoon. That is not a service that is going to help people to get out of their cars. So the fact that they think that 10% of people are going to be using that bus to get into Ruddington is not going to be the case, because even people that just want to go to work are being unable to do so, or school, or anything else. So what I suggest is we have a condition, and the condition is that this development has to be either completely or partially car-free development. Because, oh, you're all laughing, but, which I knew you would, because this is the way forward. Hamburg, Vienna, Berlin, London, Copenhagen, Glasgow, Dorset, quite a small place in Dorset, Freiburg, Slakeford Green in Edinburgh, all these places are relatively new developments that are car-free. And what they do is they are actually quite popular because they provide a lot of green space, safer play for children, and what they do to help encourage people is have a car club. So you've got a sort of your own car club in the area, rather like there are places all over the place that have car clubs. In fact, I was in Bristol last week. I don't drive, but my husband does, and we hired a car in Bristol from a car club. And in fact, the houses that are being built in Glasgow are selling for £325,000 to £425,000. So it's not that they're not going to make money out of them. So otherwise, I'm going to vote against unless we have a condition to say that this development is partially or completely car-free. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender, and multitasking there on the internet at the same time. That's a very interesting point you make about the 863 bus, but of course it also says in the paragraph that there is mitigation or potential enhancement and money's been asked for. But do you want to add anything to that, Mr. Pegram, please?
Quick points, Chairman. I understand that the access now would be closer to bus stops if it were through Musters Road. The other point I would perhaps ask members to consider is that previously this site was to be accessed from a single access point off of, and if I can find the cursor, off of Asher Lane. That would have put the traffic from 175 dwellings predominantly or solely through that section of Asher Lane past residential properties, and neither we nor the inspector considered that to be an adverse impact in terms of the amenities of those people in the wider area. Yes, I note what members are saying about impact on these 2 properties. This scheme effectively gives people the option of either going up Musters Road or along this section of Musters Road. So effectively, as the point I'm making is, previously it wasn't deemed unacceptable to have up to 175 cars going past these houses. What I'm hearing from Councillor Buckle in particular is that he's concerned about the impact of traffic on these two roads. Chairman, I think that just makes the point. I'm not satisfied that that is a sustainable reason for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. Had anyone else indicated, or Councillor Smith?
I noticed in the comments from residents that P on page 107, transport assessment, mentions the Great Central Railway as a means of transport, but it's not possible to get to Loughborough using the service. It's a tourist attraction. I mean, that's like saying go on the Bluebell Railway, isn't it, or the Pickering Goathland one. It makes you wonder whether people have looked at it. When I was first married, back in the sands of time, I lived in Bunny and I used to shop in Ruddington when I could park, and it was a difficult job in those days, and it's certainly no better now. In fact, I've given up trying to park in Ruddington. I just find there was also another comment saying this particular site, I know it's got the permission and we can't do anything about that, but this site was never going to be in the local plan, was it? It was the other side of the village. So, presumably it wasn't in because of the traffic implications.
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you. Chairman, if I can provide some clarification on that point. This site was in fact considered during the early stages of the preparation of the local plan. In fact, in terms of Greenbelt, it scored very lowly, and in terms of a Greenbelt review, you're looking for a low score, not a high score. Clearly, it was well constrained by the infrastructure around it. So from that point of view, it scored lowly on a Greenbelt situation. The reason it was taken out of the proposed sites that we were considering was because we believed at that time, supported by our highway colleagues, that this would have a severe impact on the highway network within Ruddington. Clearly, the inspector did not agree with that situation. We have still not proposed it as a site within Part 2 of the plan, but obviously we have to recognise that it has an existing commitment.
I presume the inspector did go into the high street in Ruddington and see what a bottleneck it is. One hopes.
Yes, is the answer.
I think Ruddington High Street is a notorious bottleneck, and right. I don't think anyone else has indicated. Councillor Purdue-Horan, were you basically making a proposal a few minutes ago, a recommendation? Okay. Do you have a seconder for your Councillor Bushman? Right. Do you want to add any?
I'd like to say that.
Could you put your microphone on, please, because people need to hear you.
I haven't got quieter. 175 houses in that area with one access in and out. I don't know how they're going to sell these houses, because they're going to look at the same situation that we've looked at, and they're going to come to the same conclusion. I think the whole situation is just mad. I know that's been agreed that there's 175 houses is going to be built there. I can't understand why the agent or the person who's applying for this haven't looked at that Asher Lane. Is it Asher Lane? Yeah, Asher Lane. And even contemplated on tarmacking it. You've got two legs of the bull here. You've got possibility of access on two places, and taking that traffic away from the horn of the bull up there. I will second Councillor Purdue-Horan's suggestion.
Okay, thank you for that. So the two of you then, we've got the proposed and seconded. We need to have reasons for the minutes and reason for refusal. So how would you like to define those? I beg your pardon, it's Councillor Purdue-Horan. You are the proposer of this. You're proposing a refusal. I'm correct in that, aren't I?
Yeah.
So now we need clarification for the reasons that we have to give when we go to a vote, because in a few moments, because it's been proposed and seconded, we'll be making a vote, but we have to have a reason for the recommendation, and so we need a...
Well, if I may say broadly, Mr. Chairman, it is the unacceptable impact on local residents, not just the immediate residents affected, 3 properties, maybe more than that, but also the impact on the residents on Musters Road and Western Fields in that locality, and the increased traffic and everything to do with that sort of concern. So if there is an actual wording that our officers can assist with coming anywhere near that sort of concern, I'd be grateful.
The unacceptable impact to the area.
Yeah, I've got some wording.
Yeah, Mr. Pegram's got some wording that in sort of planners.
Oh, right.
Not that different, Chairman, to Councillor Purdue-Horan's actually. It's unacceptable impact on the amenities of immediate residents and wider area, and I've put Musters Road, probably Distillery Street we need to include in that, through increased traffic movements and noise. That's the nub of it, I think, isn't it?
I'm extremely grateful.
So the Western Field goes off that way, isn't it? Yeah, it's immediately.
With the nonchalance of a horse's tail batting a fly, I tend to lose. But I'm very, very grateful for his assistance on this.
Right, thank you. So I think we're clear on the reasons for the recommendation for not granting permission for this. Anyone else want to say anything, or shall we go to a vote on this? Go to a vote. So can I have a show of hands for those in favour of the new recommendation as proposed by Councillor Purdue-Horan, seconded by Councillor Bushman, for the reasons stated to refuse permission on this application? Can I have a show of hands, please? And anyone against? One against. So that amended recommendation is passed. That means permission is refused as per on that, Mr. Pegram.
Just a point of clarification, Chairman, as that is a negative resolution, the application will not have to be referred to the planning casework unit. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. All right. Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I suspect there's going to be some people movement, so we'll just wait a few moments for the room. Pardon?
Laura's just got to find Councillor Edwards as well.
Oh, right, yes, good point, yeah.
Okay. Do you want to have that word?
Right, are we ready to move on? We have a couple of more... Are you okay? Can I just ask, we've still got a lot of members of the public here. Can I have a show of hands as to who is here? I assume you're here for a particular application. So given that time is rushing by, and I would hate you, majority of you, to have a wasted evening. The next application on the agenda is Wilford Lane, 75A Wilford Lane. Can I have a show of hands who are people who are here particularly interested in that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A show of hands for anyone who's particularly interested in the Wilford Lane application. So, 7. Right. Who's here in particular for 85 Chaworth Road? Ah, right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's a few more. So, in the interest of democracy and patience and forgiveness, would we be happy to perhaps swap the agenda and bring the... No, we wouldn't. Okay, right, I've getting that message right. Okay, fine. Just trying to show that I'm trying to get through everything. Right, so we won't do that. Thank you for your message on that. Your message on that. We'll go on to the next application, which is 75A Wilford Lane, West Bridgford. It's erection of four new dwelling houses with associated access. And who's leading us through this? I've lost my notes. Mr. Pegram is leading us through this, please.
Thank you, Chairman. There were late representations on this application, which were circulated to members yesterday. This application is an application seeking full planning permission for 4 detached properties. You will see from the history of the site, Chairman, several years ago there was an outline permission granted for up to 4 dwellings. That is no longer extant, and clearly that cannot be pursued, hence the submission of a full application on this occasion. The application relates to an area of land at the rear of properties which front Wilford Lane. If I perhaps go to this plan, it's a little bit easier. So you have Wilford Lane here. You have an access off of Wilford Lane that serves the day nursery here. Comes down the back into a rectangular shaped area of land, previously occupied by buildings which were used as laboratories, I understand. You've got Bruce Drive to the east. You have Gresham Close to the general west, and at the rear of the site you have the Nottinghamshire Forest Football Club Academy site.
Nottingham Forest.
What did I say?
It's Nottingham Forest.
Nottingham Forest,
Yeah,
I did say.
You said
Did I say Nottinghamshire? I do apologise. I'm a stranger to the earth. Right. No, don't. Chairman, take you through some photographs. This is looking from Wilford Lane up the access. That's the day nursery property on the right. If you recall, that was the subject of an application which came to this committee when it was a change of use to a day nursery, and they have an access arrangement which is effectively in through that access and out through there. In there and out there, Chairman. Thank you for the correction at the back there. 75A is a bungalow which sits at the back of the site, or towards the back of the properties here. This is looking down that access track. Again, you have the day nursery on the right, 75A on the left. And now we're back at the access onto Wilford Lane, looking in a generally easterly direction towards West Bridgford. You will see that this is taken, the case officer took this roughly in the position that the visibility display would be measured from. And then that's looking back the other way in a westerly direction, so you have the access to the day nursery here. That's now stood on the access track looking back down the lane towards Wilford Lane. This fence is actually set partly within the ownership of this access drive, as I understand it, Chairman. So the proposal is to set that fence back around about a metre in places, which widens this access track down to the application site. That's at the rear of the site, so you've got the bungalows on Gresham Close there, you've got number 75A, and there's a parking area in here. Access would be through that, what you might describe as a pinch point at that point there. Now within the site, Chairman, so we're looking at the properties on Bruce Drive. 3 detached properties, which, if I could find my plan, Chairman, I could give you the numbers of. 246, thank you, Kirsty. And then spinning around, looking across the site again, so you 246, that's number 12 in this area here. And then you've got the Academy football grounds to the right there. Again, closer shot of 2, 4 and 6, Bruce Drive. Looking more southerly across the Academy site. And then again, looking across the Academy site, that being, as I'm saying, Chairman, number 12, Bruce Drive. That's looking at the bungalows on Gresham Close. You can see catch netting here for the football academy. and then again looking at a generally northwesterly direction across the site, picking up those bungalows in Gresham Close. The proposal, Chairman, is, as I said, for 4 detached properties, 2 house types. The inner 2 are 3-bedroom properties, the outer 2 are 2-bedroom properties. Much of the accommodation at ground floor is what we might say less sensitive to flood risk, so it's garage, utility room, there is a garden room. So the first floor, the lounges are at first floor in all 4 properties, facing out the back of the properties. That's a more detailed layout plan showing you the access down through. Just to give you some idea of dimensions, Chairman, here's one I prepared earlier. At the access point here, the width would be 5.25 metres for the first 5 metres of the entrance. There's a proposal, you can't quite see it on this plan, it's quite faint, there's a proposal for a bin store, a bin pickup point, if you like, at that point there. At that point, the width of the access would narrow to 4.54 metres. Beyond that, obviously, it would increase in width, and there's more than enough room both at the entrance and on the access road for 2 vehicles to pass. The pinch point at this point here would be 4.37 metres. So clearly that's the narrowest part of the access into the site. As I say, it's 4 properties. You can see a street scene there of the properties. That's the rear elevation of those properties facing out onto the academy grounds. And in terms of the details, that is the 2-bedroom properties on plots 1 and 4. So as I say, there is a first floor lounge accommodation with Juliet balcony. On the 2 central plots, they would be 3-bedroom properties, again with their lounges at first floor with Juliet balconies and kitchen accommodation there. Those 2 properties do have accommodation within the roof space there. Chairman, the site is clearly in a sustainable location. It's easy access to West Bridgeford. It is in an area which is on the flood risk maps at risk of flooding. So the application has been supported by a flood risk assessment. The site on the Environment Agency maps is Zone 2 and 3A. If we apply the strategic flood risk assessment, the site is equivalent to a lower flood risk level, but clearly is at risk of flooding from overtopping or breach of the defences. Hence the proposal to put the more sensitive accommodation within those properties up at upper levels. Chairman, as I say, it is a sustainable location. It has had previously outline permission for residential development, and on that basis the application is before you with a recommendation to grant permission. Just one correction before I hand over to you. It's 2 2-bedroom properties and 2 4-bedroom properties. So if you see, I did look at that, there's 2 bedrooms up in the roof space and 2 bedrooms on the first floor. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you, Mr. Pegram. That's clear. We have some speakers on this item as well. So we have 3 speakers on this. First of all, Mr. Bailey, who is the applicant. Are you here? So I'm not sure if you were here earlier, but you have up to 5 minutes. Press the red button, and the clock will start counting down. Thank you.
Good evening, committee. As the gentleman just mentioned, the site in question was formerly a water testing laboratory, so it's a brownfield site that's previously been developed and has stood empty for a long period of time. This will bring it into use. It's surrounded by houses on 3 sites, so it's logical that it becomes developed. The comments from the technical consultees have all been answered and satisfied. The traffic consultants have demonstrated safe access and egress from the site, and this has been approved by Highways. There were some questions, and I think questions have been raised about the extent of the site, but those were clarified by the gentleman who spoke previously. I think the site is clearly sustainable. A lot of what we've heard this evening is about traffic and people having to get in their cars to go places where this is obviously located in Welford. got the facilities of the bus and the tram and schools locally. Planning officers raised some concerns about some of the properties, and we adjusted the size of plots 1 and 4 to meet these concerns. And I hope the members will follow the recommendations of the officers and grant permission. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Bailey. Very clear, thank you. And our next speaker on this is Mr. Tim Kirby. And you are objecting to the application? I think that's, yes, Mr. Kirby, isn't it? So, right, yes, and okay, I sense a presentation or something coming up, but do bear in mind you've got your 5 minutes maximum as soon as you start speaking.
Mr. Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Tim Kirby, and I'm the owner and resident of 75 Wilford Lane, and I'm a recently retired civil engineer and have spent a considerable portion of my 40-year career setting out and managing road construction. With me is Mr. Paul Taylor, who is the owner and resident of the bungalow 75A. I speak on behalf of both of us. Our primary objection is one of road safety. However, I would first like to point out that although your report states that an outline planning permission was granted for this site in 2002, it fails to mention that an application in 2006 for a development very similar to this application was rejected. That application had houses of similar number of houses on the site, but they were only 2-storey. I have a copy of that decision notice with me. I also note that the photographs just presented never point the lens towards Mr. Taylor's property and the proximity of these developments towards Mr. Taylor's bungalow, which would be entirely overlooked. In respect of road safety, Mr. Taylor and I both know that in busy periods, we regularly have to wait in excess of 3 minutes, sometimes even 5 minutes, to exit from our driveways. If a vehicle from the proposed development were awaiting its egress as a vehicle wished to enter the nursery forecourt, that nursery vehicle would inevitably cause traffic on Wilford Lane to slow severely or to stop until the other car could squeeze past the emerging car or the emerging car left the exit. This plan, drawn to a scale of 1 to 50, shows a vehicle of the same dimensions that the applicant has used to prove the viability of his turning head. The other 2 vehicles are Range Rover size vehicles, Audi, BMW, of the sorts of vehicles that drop off and collect the 30 children a day who attend that nursery. The slowing and stopping traffic is exactly the scenario that has caused 2 accidents in the past 4 months alone as cars tried to enter and leave the doctor's surgery just 35 metres further down the lane. That entrance into the doctor's is 6 metres wide and has a 16-metre bell mouth rather than the 5.25 metres proposed here with no bell mouth. I have contemporary photographs of both accidents that I sent to Councillor Wheeler. Further, on the submitted plans, the applicant details a visibility display of 24.4 metres on the eastern side, the side whose traffic is nearest to the proposed development's access and egress. At 30 miles an hour, that equates to 1.8 seconds. But many cars travel much significantly faster on Wilford Lane. However, to achieve this 24.4 metres, the line of sight crosses over Mr. Taylor's property at the end of his drive. And this is clearly shown on the applicant's plans. I know his ownership to be the back of footpath, since when the previous owner of 75A came to sell that property, his solicitor found that we owned a ransom strip at 75, and we sold that land to the previous owner for £1 in order that the bungalow could be sold to Mr. Taylor. If Mr. Taylor was to erect a boundary fence to the end of his drive, to the back of footpath, as he is fully entitled to do, visibility to oncoming traffic would be less than 9 metres. That means that at 30 miles an hour, a car on Wilfred Lane would hit or pass a vehicle leaving the applicant's egress 0.66 seconds after it was first visible to the driver. Put another way, if Mr Taylor was to erect his boundary fence to get a car from the proposed development's egress to the other carriageway turning right, that car would have to travel approximately 9 metres forward in that 0.6 seconds, and that's just about what Lewis Hamilton manages as he leaves the grid on the Formula One race, but he goes in a straight line. This guy's got to turn through 90 degrees. In conclusion, I beg you to reject this application, or at least leave it pending until you can verify my dimensions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for you were just over 5. Thank you for the drawings as well. We have one more speaker on this. This is one of the local ward members, Councillor Phillips. So if you would like to step up, please. As soon as you're ready, and I think you've provided some photographs as well, haven't you?
Yes, these 2 photographs are mine.
Okay, thank you.
So I object to this application mainly on the grounds of safety. The access road to the 4 properties is very narrow and of single track at the moment. The 4 proposed homes are family homes with parking for 2 vehicles each. The new home plans show garages, but modern cars don't fit in garages, so these won't be used. Therefore, you could not consider these garages as additional parking spaces. Visitors in cars to these new properties would have nowhere to park and would use the turning area. This will make it impossible for other vehicles, such as delivery vehicles, to turn round. These vehicles would then have to reverse along the narrow track directly onto Wilford Lane, which is extremely dangerous. Alternatively, vehicles reversing out could reverse onto the nursery car park in order to turn and face a forward direction towards Wilford Lane. Reversing onto the nursery car park is a major safety concern for parents and toddlers using the nursery. When the nursery was given planning permission, it was stipulated that vehicles had to enter from one point and exit from a separate point. This now seems to be of little importance as we try to accommodate a means for vehicles to access and exit the proposed 4 new properties. The council would be going against the rules that were put in place for the nursery, as vehicles from the 4 new properties would enter and exit the same route that the nursery vehicles enter. If vehicles were not to exit from the nursery entry route, they would have to exit by means of going across the nursery car park, posing a danger again to parents and toddlers. The planning report suggests the access road will be wide enough to accommodate 2 vehicles coming from opposite directions, and I hear what Mr Pegram said about the extra metre, so that might be possible in certain sections of it. Looking at my 2 photographs, you'll see that the driver of a vehicle emerging from the track onto Wilford Lane does not have a clear view to the right of oncoming vehicles, and that was taken from my car seat. A hedgerow, a telegraph pole obscure the driver's view of Wilford Lane to the right. The driver will block the footpath on Wilford Lane as they wait for a gap in the traffic, and the chances are it will be a long wait. If the driver does not pull right up to the edge of Wilford Lane, their visibility will be reduced further to the right. Any pedestrians walking along Wilford Lane will have to wait for the car to either reverse, pull onto Wilford Lane, or they will have to walk onto the road to pass the vehicle blocking the pavement. This creates a danger to the pedestrians and also to the emerging car driver, as the pedestrians will further block the driver's view of the road. The emerging driver only has a few metres of clear sight and makes joining the highway extremely hazardous. one of the documents would have you believe that there is 45 metres of vision splay. If I refer you back to my photograph taken from where I sat in the seat of my car, you can see there is definitely not 45 metres of vision splay. I would like to know how the planners arrived at 45 metres when it is more like 4.5 metres. Vehicles travelling along Wilford Lane, east to west, will only be able to see the bonnet of any emerging car and only at the very last minute. The neighbouring property at 12 Bruce Drive will be overlooked and all privacy will be gone due to the height of the new development and the proposed balcony. The new properties will have a clear view of the rear garden of the nursery play area, and I don't think this is acceptable where children are concerned. The property at 75A will be overlooked, so it will have a loss of privacy and natural light due to the height of the new development. Other objectors have raised the same concerns as me, particularly on the grounds of safety. I think it's incredible that the Highways Department supports this application and that our Planning Department recommendation is for planning permission to be granted. I have every confidence that the Planning Committee will see the application for what it is, and that is an accident waiting to happen, and refuse planning permission accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips, and just in your 5 minutes ago, we're all doing very well on our 5 minutes tonight, so thank you for that. Right, we've no more public speakers on here, so we've heard from Mr. Bailey, who is the applicant, who was explaining what the site has been used for in years gone by, and he regards it as a sustainable area for transport, schools, etc. We heard from Mr. Kirby and also had Mr. Taylor with him, who was talking about and showing us concerns about road safety and some other planning history for previously rejected applications. And Councillor Phillips is also talking about primarily road safety, visibility, impact on the nursery and overlooking privacy issues. I think I've covered most points there. Would you like to pick up on those, please?
Yes, Chairman. The history of the property is actually contained in your late representations, and the application that was refused one on a technical ground, which related to flood risk. Clearly, this current submission is supported by a new flood risk assessment and has not attracted an objection from the technical consultee. The previous application was also for the construction of a two-storey building containing 5 apartments and a terrace of 3 two-storey dwellings with bedrooms in the roof space. So it was a more intense development. Clearly, members must have regard for the impact on the amenities of neighbouring properties and must reach their own conclusions. But clearly, your officers were of the view that this reduced scheme effectively does not result in such unacceptable impacts as that previous application. Just in terms of the firstly, let's take the turning area, Chairman. The turning area, we asked them for a swept path analysis to demonstrate whether an emergency vehicle could turn around within the turning area that was being provided. What they actually provided was a swept path analysis for a Sprinter van. Clearly not an emergency vehicle. However, Chairman, we didn't deem the fact that an emergency vehicle couldn't turn around on site to be a reason for refusal. And clearly, otherwise that would have been featured as a recommendation for reason for refusal. In terms of the highway and visibility displays, Chairman, the way that a visibility display is measured in accordance with the 6Cs guidance for a road of 30 miles an hour, I note what the resident said about vehicles travelling faster, but in the absence of any evidence to that effect, we have to base it on the design speed of the road. So you measure 2.4 metres back from the edge of the running carriageway to a point in the centre of the access, and you then measure longitudinally along the road to a point 1 metre out from the curb. So that gives you, in this instance, the requirement is for a 43 metre display for a 30 mile an hour road. In this instance, they've submitted information to demonstrate how they might achieve a 45 metre display. Now, I note the point that the resident made, and I think I understand the point, but if I come to this photograph, I think what we are hearing is that, in effect, that's more the back edge of the footway, so the resident could actually put a fence up to the back edge of the footway. Clearly, under permitted development rights, you can only erect a fence up to 1 metre high for reasons of not obscuring visibility from accesses and junctions. So although there is that concern, Chairman, if a fence was to be erected, it could only be 1 metre high, and I'm satisfied that that wouldn't significantly obscure visibility from the access. Again, Chairman, dare I utter the words, it has been scrutinised by the Highway Authority, and based on the information available to them, they have not raised an objection to this application. I accept that this point may not have been known to them, but hopefully my explanation about the limited height of any boundary treatment in that area helps members in considering that issue.
Mr. Kirby's handed in a diagram, I think it's
Oh, right.
a smaller version of what he had given. It's a matter for you, Chair, if you wish to
We can hand it
present
round. We can hand it round, yes. Sorry.
Chairman, in terms of the point about the use of the garages, I'll find the relevant plan. This particular scheme, wrong way. What they're proposing is 2 parking spaces onto the driveway for each property. You can't see it in this picture, it's a bit faint. But also a double garage, which I've scaled off the plans as being 4.8 metres wide. Clearly that's large enough to accommodate 1 vehicle at least, and you've got the 2 on the driveway. So again, we're not concerned about the level of parking that is proposed to be provided as part of this application. In terms of the impact on number 12 Bruce Drive, Chairman, we have looked at that very carefully ourselves. It was an area that we acknowledged was a potential issue for adverse impact. Again, if I refer to my diagram, that helps me a little bit here. Chairman, the view we came to, there would be a Juliet balcony roughly in that position at first floor level. The distance from the property between that and the back wall of the property and the neighbouring property is around about 24 metres. And it's not immediately to the rear of 12 Bruce Drive. So we reached the conclusion, Chairman, that although there may be a degree of overlooking, it wasn't so severe as to warrant refusal of the application. Clearly that is a matter for members to judge on as well as the decision makers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pegram. We've just had a copy of Mr. Kirby's diagrams being passing around the committee, so that's what we saw earlier on. So I've already got Councillor Hull has indicated to speak, followed by Councillor Smith, please. So Councillor Hull.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Pegram has actually more or less answered the question. I was concerned about emergency vehicles getting down there past that pinch point, which I've got written down as 4.7 metres. So I accept that the refuse lorry will not come down there. He'll stay at the top because the bins are going to be at the top. But a fire engine and an ambulance can get down and turn round for each of those properties. Is that correct?
No, Chairman, just to clarify, the swept analysis was for a Sprinter van, not an emergency vehicle. However, my understanding is that to satisfy building regulations, and I may have to do a quick calculation if I say this, but the emergency vehicle will drive 20 metres up a drive and to get to within 45 metres of any point of the property that they are servicing. In reality, Chairman, fire engines will reverse in and out because it's a matter of emergency. They will get to the site. But no, there isn't turning on site for a fire appliance.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. The picture of the splay that Mr. Pegram showed, there's only one problem with that. Whoever took it is probably taller, or the camera height would be taller than the driver sitting in the vehicle. Which I suspect would be probably, there could be a couple of feet in it, I should think. Yeah.
You're referring to that photograph?
Yeah. Because the one from Councillor Phillips' car is distinctly lower. I mean, it would be, because you're sitting, aren't you, and you're down. So I'm not convinced about the display at all. And I'm also concerned, did you say the lounges are at the back of the houses or at the front? Because, so the bedrooms are overlooking 75A?
Correct.
Right. It's not very satisfactory, I don't think.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to add anything else to that?
Chairman, just as this point's been raised, I did ask the case officer myself about how this picture was taken. It was taken approximately 2.4 metres back from the running edge of the carriageway in a crouched position. So it was trying to be representative of the view that a driver might get from that access. You have seen the picture, just to make things fair and equal. You've seen the picture that Councillor Phillips took. However, Chairman, I wasn't sat in the car when that was taken, so equally I can't validate the accuracy of that in terms of a view from a vehicle driver. But, Chairman, what I would add is the Highway Authority do not object.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pegram. Councillor Mayles.
I'm not quite. I'm looking at my map upside down because I'm used to Wilford Lane. Any upstairs rooms, will there be, well, what's the distance between an upstairs room on the proposed development and number 75A?
So, Chairman, in the gable end of that property, there is a bedroom. Certainly in terms of the inner two, there's a bedroom at first floor with a window in the gable. Similarly, there's a window in the gable of the two-bedroom properties. The distance, taking this one here, the distance from the sort of gable feature to the back of number 75A is 17.9 metres.
And that's acceptable?
Your officers consider that to be acceptable, yes.
And because in the way they've been built and they're using the first floor for the living area, are the other houses in the area built in the same way? I'm aware that it is a flood area, but I'm just curious that the 4 houses or proposed houses should be built in this way. What about the rest of them?
Mr. Pegram will pick us up on that.
Chairman, clearly I haven't been in all the properties in this area. However, the point I would make is that 75A is a bungalow. The properties on Gresham Close are bungalows. I cannot speak for the ones on Bruce Drive. They look to be conventional in their layout to me, so they may have lounges at ground floor, built at a time before flood risk was perhaps as much of an issue as it is today. If we go further afield along Wilford Lane, I think there are various initiatives which have been employed to address flood risk issues, including raising ground levels and things of that nature.
Thank you. Councillor Manager.
Thank you. Could I just have a look at one of the photographs where it showed a lot of buildings with solar panels on, please? Which, sorry, could someone tell me where those buildings are on the map, please?
If I can refer you to page 129 of your agenda and the map you have, to the east of the main body of the site, you have 2, 4 and 6. So I take that to be 2, 4 and 6.
It has been mentioned that there's loss of light. Would that actually include loss of light to those solar panels? And secondly, considering Rushcliffe's, you all laughed not long ago about the car-free thing, well, some of you did, but of course it is Rushcliffe Borough Council's policy to act to prevent climate change, although it may be too late for all of us. But I do wonder why the fact that the applicant emphasised how good the public transport is on this site, which I fully agree with, because there is the tram and also several buses that run quite regularly along here. So I was wondering why it is necessary to have quite so much parking. So are we actually encouraging people to have at least 2 cars in this particular development? And perhaps if there wasn't that, perhaps people might use the very good levels of public transport that there is. So could you answer the question about the solar panels? The other comment is really just an observation. I realise that we have to look at what we have in front of us. Thank you.
Indeed we do. We can only comment and look at what the application that we have with us. Solar panels, light issues for those, is there anything in the rules about?
No, Chairman, it's an interesting one. I think predominantly when we talk about loss of light and overshadowing, we're talking more about people's amenity.
Indeed, yeah.
Interestingly enough, those roof slopes are generally west-facing. So clearly they don't pick up the full benefit of southerly sun for generating energy. However, just to help perhaps, I can give you some dimensions again. This is the 2-storey, 2-bedroom property on plot 4. The distance from the side elevation of that property to, I'll take it to that point because that's effectively would be the eaves line, is 19.4 metres. Distance from that elevation to there is 16.8 metres. And I think somewhere I saw helpfully a section. Is it there? That's it. So if I zoom in perhaps. And clearly I'm not an expert on solar panels, Chairman, but what you can see here, what we use in terms of assessing impact on overshadowing and loss of light properties is 2 different calculations, but in this instance the relevant one is what we call the 25-degree rule, which is you take a line from the top of the windows or approximate position at the top of the windows in the neighbouring property at 25 degrees. If development breaches that line, then you need to consider further. I'm not saying it's totally unacceptable, but you need to consider further the impact of overshadowing and loss of light. Given that the roof is in that position with solar panels on, my view, Chairman, is that this would not have, if any significant impact in terms of overshadowing or loss of light to those solar panels. And clearly this helps us in determining the issue of overshadowing and loss of light to the amenity of this neighbouring property. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. I hope that was some help. Right.
And we must consider what's before us.
And indeed, again, as we say so many times, we can only discuss what's in front of us. I'm getting the impression there's not many more speakers on this, so unless anyone wants to make a point, we have a recommendation. Is anyone prepared to move that recommendation, please? Councillor Mayles. And do you have a seconder for that?
I'm sorry, Councillor Mayles is first proposing it and I'm seconding
So
it.
right, so the proposal as per the recommendation has been, the recommendation proposed and seconded. No other speakers on this, so we better go to a vote. I think we've raised a lot of points on here tonight, so I think we'll go to a vote on the recommendation. All those in favour of the application as per the recommendation, please. Got that? And anyone, those against? So that was 9. Right, so that was 9 in favour and 2 against. So that means the permission is granted. But thank you everybody for your contributions on that. Right, ladies and earlier when we started the meeting, I said that we have a cut-off point of 10 o'clock. The rules do allow us to extend a maximum half hour to a meeting, which would take us to 10:30 at the very latest. We do have a couple of more applications on the agenda. I'm aware that there's quite a lot of people who are particularly interested in the next item, I think. So are we happy to, if need be, go past 10 o'clock to 10:30? But I do have to make it clear that the rules and all legal things say we can't go beyond 10:30, and also people's state of mind and all the rest of it. So we'll move on to the next application, which is 85 Chorworth Road, West Bridgford. demolition of a bungalow, erection of 5 apartments and the creation of a parking area. And Mr Pegram again, please, on this. A busy night.
It is, isn't it? Thank you, Chairman. Application relates to number 85 Chorworth Road. Site is currently occupied by a bungalow, which you'll see in the photos in just a moment. On the corner here is a single-story, it's actually a single-story bungalow, but with accommodation in the roof, which is used as a dentist surgery. And here you have a pair of Victorian semis, which have, from the front, they appear as 2-story, but they have got rooms in the roof with windows in the gable end. Here you have South Road to the south of the site and Loughborough Road to the west, junction of Loughborough Road and Chorworth Road. That's just the aerial photograph, again confirming those details which I provided. And then if we look at the photographs going through the site, this is looking along Chorworth Road to Loughborough Road. So you have the pair of Victorian semis, you have the application bungalow, and then you have the dental surgery on the corner. Moving along the road in a westerly direction, getting closer in, you can see the property in question. The proposal is to demolish that property and construct a block of 5 apartments, 2 3-bedroom, 3 2-bedroom, in a, sorry, start again, Andrew, 2 2-bedroom, 3 1-bedroom, in a block that would provide 3-story accommodation with the second floor predominantly within the roof space. That's again looking head on at the property, driveway to the neighbouring property there, and out on the junction effectively, or close to the junction with Loughborough Road. Looking back, there's the dental surgery there and the application site. That's looking into the application site. This is the existing driveway which serves the property, so it has a workshop and parking at the rear. And then this is now looking from within number 83. There's a bay window feature at ground floor on the side of the property, which is the sole window that serves that room. So we've got the benefit of some photographs at different angles looking out, one to the side, head on at the bungalow here, so you can see the mullion of the window there, and then looking across the back. Property also has to the rear a conservatory which has windows facing the side, so again we have some views from that conservatory for you onto the neighbouring property. Now into the application site, this is in the rear garden, so this is the existing parking arrangements for the bungalow. Properties on South Road to the rear, that's number 83 there with its garage and driveway alongside the boundary. Slightly step back view of that feature. And then looking across the driveway of the application site to the dental surgery on the corner, and then looking at the rear of the dwelling, the existing bungalow on the site. And then looking back across, so those photographs you saw, first 3 were taken from within that bay window, and then the subsequent photographs were taken from within the conservatory there. That's looking south towards properties on South Road within the application site. And then again looking across at the dental surgery. So the proposal, Chairman, is to construct a 3-story building to provide 5 apartments. This application, when originally submitted, positioned the block over this side, close to the boundary with number 83. That was considered to be unacceptable for reasons of the outlook from that window being compromised, particularly that window, because it was the sole window to that room. Revised plans were submitted shifting the block across to this side of the site, with the access, instead of the access being down here, now being down this boundary. Obviously there were some concerns about the access and the noise that access and parking would generate. The plans show an acoustic 2-metre fence running to that point, from that point there, along the length of the boundary to the rear, to mitigate any potential noise impact from the use of the access. Those are the elevations of the property. Ground floor, 1 1-bedroom, 1 2-bedroom. On the first floor, 2 1-bedroom flats. And then up on the top floor, you have a 2-bedroom apartment. So as I say, it's 2 2-bedroom, 3 1-bedroom apartments. Chairman, this is obviously a sustainable location. It's close to facilities. The issues really here turn on the impact of the proposal on the amenities of the area and neighbouring properties. As I say, negotiations have taken place to address initial concerns with regard to those impacts. The building has been shifted, and your officers are now happier with the proposal and satisfied that although it may have some impact, that won't be so great to warrant refusal. I'll also point out that first floor windows are proposed to be obscure glazed with no opening element below 1.7 metres above floor level. So again, in an attempt to protect the amenities of the neighbouring properties. Chairman, the application is before you with a recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. We have 3 speakers on this item, and the first is Mr. Mystery, who is the applicant. If you'd like to address us, please. And as before, up to 5 minutes. The clock starts ticking when you press the red button. Thank you.
Good evening. Before I come on to the plans, I'd like to provide the committee with a review of the current site, some of which has already been mentioned. The existing bungalow sits on quite a large plot. In fact, it's double the width of the neighbouring properties of 81 and 83. Well, it's 81 and 83 combined. To the right, it does have a dental surgery which resides on Loughborough Road, and however, on the other 3 sides, it's heavily overlooked and overshadowed by 2- and 3-storey properties. There's quite a substantial care home opposite, and there's 3-storey next door. The property is 1950s dormer bungalow, and being a dormer bungalow, it's got a high-pitched roof and has a 2nd floor. With regards to Charworth, it's the only bungalow that's on Charworth Road, and it does look at odds against the other Victorian properties that exist. It is of an age construction, and it does suffer from damp and has some structural issues, and as per the planning officer's observations, removal of it and would not be detrimental to the area. A plan was originally submitted in 2016 to replace the bungalow with a single building of 6 one-bedroom apartments. That was refused on the grounds of massing and scale and not being sympathetic with the area. That said, based on the feedback that we actually received, we didn't think it was appropriate to simply modify the existing design and resubmit. So we went into pre-application consultation with the planning officer, taking into account the grounds for refusal and also the feedback and comments received. From that, we recommissioned a brand new set of plans, taking into account all of the elements mentioned previously. The new plan and design outwardly looks like a detached property, and the architecture is more in keeping with the other properties on Charworth Road. Most significantly, we've reduced the number of apartments from 6 to 5. We've made better use of the roof space, and in general, we've reduced the overall massing and scale. And you'll see that we believe it actually improves the street scene over the existing bungalow. We've also made provision for off-road parking, but as been mentioned previously, it is well served. The most significant change that was recommended by the planning officer at the time was to move the entire building to the right, and that will give greater privacy to number 83, and also moving the driveway further away from Loughborough Road will actually improve safety over the current drive, which is over to the right-hand side as opposed to the left-hand side. I might have got that the wrong way around, sorry. It does maximise the space to 7.7 metres, it improves vehicle site access, and we've also incorporated the 2-metre acoustic fence, which is not anticipated to produce excess noise. However, it will afford greater privacy to both 83 and the new development. So, in summary, I hope you can see that we have collaborated and cooperated fully with the planning officer, enacted all the changes and overcome all of the reasons for the original refusal by submitting brand new plans. It does deliver considerate, sustainable, and it's relatively low density considering the size of the actual plot, and is a high quality development that will provide affordable housing which is sympathetic with the neighbouring properties, and will provide enhanced privacy as well with the introduction of the fence, and fulfils all the criteria laid down by the relevant agencies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mystery. That's, again, within 5 minutes. Our next speaker is Mr. Colin Woodier, who is objecting. So, I'm sorry we're all having a long evening this evening, but and again, in your own time, but up to five minutes.
Good evening, councillors. Please bear with me. I don't usually address such a distinguished gathering. In fact, I don't normally address any meetings. I must start with the fact that the current bungalow on this site is a transition between the Victorian two-storey buildings and the more petite one-storey bungalows on Loughborough Road. This new build does not address that point. In contrast, it towers over both the bungalows and the Victorian properties, making a very oppressive and visual impact. The full three-storey impact of the proposed property with its mass and depth would have a significant visual effect, no matter how much the architect plays around with the eaves and the ridges. Going to our property at 83, the main living spaces are on the side of the property and benefit full bay windows, as when it was built, it was designed as the last house on the road. So the builders took advantage and placed the main windows on the side of the building. The proposed build will block light and be detrimental to our quiet enjoyment of our property. It is our belief that the proposed bill still does not fully comply with supplementary planning guidance with a reference to the effect of new build on existing properties. The large three-storey build will completely cover the side of our property, bar 6 inches, which will restrict our access to light, in particular with the addition of a 2-metre fence, which will be oppressive and detrimentally affect my wife's claustrophobia. The windows of the proposed build, which are living areas, will completely overlook our rear garden, destroying the privacy which we have very much enjoyed over the years. Please bear with me. I apologise for bringing your attention to some key policies which the proposed bill does not meet. Core Strategy Policy 1, Part 10 states, any development should make a positive contribution to the public realm and sense of place. It should have regard to the local context and reinforce local characteristics. The development should be assessed in terms listed under Section 2 of Policy 10, and in particular relevance to this application are 2B, where this proposal should be assessed in terms of its impact on neighbouring amenity, and 2F in terms of its massing, scale and proportions. Policy GP2, Criterion D, and HOU2 go on to make the same points, that the scale, density, height, massing and design should be sympathetic to the character and appearance of neighbouring building and surrounding areas. They should not lead to an over-intensive form of development and be overbearing in relation to neighbouring properties, nor lead to undue shadowing or loss of privacy, and that the location of the site should be such that it does not have an adverse visual impact. The previous plans were rejected by the planning officer, and the rejection reads as follows. The proposed development, by reason of siting, scale, massing, size and design, will create a discordant element on the site and street scene. The building will be an overly dominant structure and out of keeping with the transitional nature of the site between the two-storey and the single-storey buildings, and will result in an imposing building harmful to the character and appearance of the site and street scene. The only thing that has changed since that refusal is the proposed plan has increased in mass, size, footprint and intensity of use. We therefore object most strongly to these plans, and we request that the planning once again be refused. You'll be pleased to ask me to finish with the quotes. In conclusion, there are also lots of relevant objections that have been raised by the 50 commentators on these plans. These have been raised by neighbours and nearby residents and bring local opinion and feelings to the table, which is very unfavourable to the planning application. And this opposition has continued to grow as plan after larger plan has been put forward and refused. These applications have been long, arduous and stressful for both my wife and I, and we are both ex-service veterans in our 70s, and we would request that its application please be refused. I thank you for your time and patience.
Thank you, Mr. Woodier. And it's not easy addressing a group of people. Even those of us who are supposed to be used to it find it a bit daunting at times. So you did very well. So thank you. Right, and our next speaker on this is local one of the ward members, Councillor Edwards. Please.
Chair, before we start, could I ask that the picture, we had a picture from inside the garden of the bungalow looking towards number 83. Could we have that up? Yes, that one there. Okay, thank you very much. In speaking tonight to the committee, I'm speaking on behalf of Councillor Donoghue as well, who's the other ward member. We are at one with this. The reasons for our objection are set out clearly in the report in paragraphs 5 to 7. And Chair, you've all been able to read that. I'm not going to go through all that in great detail. The objections relate to the height, the scale and the massing of the proposals. You can see very clearly here that the bungalow is at a much lower level, and the at number 83, the imposition of a 3-storey building will have a damaging effect on the privacy of the people at 83 and of the amenity that they currently enjoy, especially in terms of their habitable rooms, the bay window and the conservatory, which you can see clearly there, which benefit also from the low boundary wall that's shown there. So those are the considerations which I'd ask the committee to particularly bear in mind and put weight on. Chair, I'm a bit concerned about some comments in paragraph 33, which I could just draw the committee's attention to. The neighbouring property, that means number 83, has windows on all floors looking onto the application site, which itself is not particularly neighbourly. To me, that comment's looking at the issue from the wrong end of the telescope. The fault here is not the owners and the occupiers at number 83. For 116 years, they and the previous owners have been able to live there and develop the property when this was for more than 50 years a vacant plot, and then this bungalow was built approximately 60 years ago. So I'm a bit concerned about that comment, and Chair, perhaps you on behalf of the committee could reassure that the value judgment implied in the comment doesn't reflect on the current owners and occupiers at number 83. There's some concern. Obviously, the applicant wants to put in as many flats as possible on this, and looking at the plans, the overall room sizes look small, and I'd welcome some comments from the planning officers on whether the proposed sizes of the rooms meet national minimum standards, particularly where, at the top where there is sloping roofs. Finally, we really ask that the committee refuses the planning permission for the reasons that are set out in paragraph 7, which refer to the, which I put down there, which refer to the detriment from the height, the scale and the massing on the neighbouring property, and ask you to refuse permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Right, we heard from Mr Mystery, who's the applicant, Mr Woodier, who explained his neighbour's perspective, and Councillor Edwards had a couple of questions, particularly the comments about the neighbourly windows and the room sizes. Can we comment on those, please?
Yes, Chairman. Can I firstly start with an apology? But I will rectify that apology in the way we used to do this before we circulated the late representations. I'm looking at the online file. There are, I would estimate, 5 additional comments which were not included in the report. So there are 5 additional representations from neighbouring properties at 54 Chorworth, 76 Chorworth, 24 Chorworth, 66 South Road and 59 Chorworth. Generally, Chairman, they raise the same comments that were made previously. The additional points that were raised relate to where things like cycles would be stored and cleaning items, etc. There's also reference to the national space standards that Councillor Edwards referred to. Those are recommended standards. It is for authorities to either adopt or not adopt those standards. In Rushcliffe, we have chosen not to adopt those standards. So in terms of a potential reason for refusal, that would not be a justified reason to refuse permission. It wouldn't be supported by policy. There's also reference to 2 accidents witnessed on the corner of the junction. Clearly, Chairman, this application has been assessed by the Highway Authority and not found to be unacceptable. In terms of the storage of cycles and things, there is to be retained at the back of the site a workshop, and there's also a bin store in that area there. So that building would provide some amenity or amenity building for the residents of the flats. Just to pick up on a couple of the other points, Chairman, concern was raised about the 2-metre fence that would be erected on, is that zoomed out? Yes, on the boundary between the 2 properties. Actually, probably the best picture I can go to is the one that Councillor Edwards asked. So at the moment there is a relatively low wall. Proposal is to erect a 2-metre acoustic fence along this boundary. Yes, that will have some impact. However, Chairman, under permitted development, the owner of the property would be able to erect a 2-metre fence along that boundary in any event. So there is a fallback position in planning terms. Reference was made to the policies which the objector did not consider the proposal to satisfy. Clearly, we have assessed this application against those policies ourselves. We are at a different view to the objector, clearly, but those conditions or policies were set out in the report, so we've clearly considered those policies in determining or coming to our recommendation. The other issue was reference to the previous refusal, Chairman, and that was a very different scheme. In fact, it was a block of 6 apartments, conventional 3 stories, with accommodation on 3 floors, not within the roof space. I'm just trying to find it now, Chairman, if so I can refer to it. So yes, it was. There was. Sorry, tell a lie. It was 3 stories. Front elevation had 2 dormers, but it was a single block with little articulation in the roof. The proposal now before you obviously does provide a gable feature, not uncommon of properties in the general locality with a articulation and a drop in the roof to provide some transition between this site and the bungalow on the corner. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you. I hope that's addressed the queries. Who would like to start on this, please? Councillor Smith.
I've just been having another look through the report and I can find no reference to how high this building is going to be and how it relates to number 83. Could you give us any details on that, please, Mr. Pegram?
Chairman, I know you can't see them. The dimensions are on the plans here, but just to take you through those. That dimension there to eaves is just over 6. It's 6.080 metres. To the ridge, it's 9.9 metres. On this side, you're looking at just a shade over 5 metres to the eaves, and then 9.2 metres to the ridge. I think there was somewhere. Did I see a street scene? These do come with health warnings, Chairman. I don't know how the applicant or his architect have ascertained the accurate height of that building, but that attempts to show what the sort of context is within the street scene. I say it comes with a health warning. We have had situations when neighbouring property may have been shown not quite accurately, but as I say, I can't vouch for this particular plan, but that attempts to demonstrate what the appearance of the building might look like in the street scene.
Okay, do you want to come? Is that helpful? Okay, thank you. Right, no other speakers on this? Councillor Smith. So you're moving the recommendation as per the report. Right, do you have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Mayles? Okay, right. Well, we've had quite a lot of information and discussion there. The recommendation as shown has been moved and seconded. No one else wants to say anything? So I think we'll better go to a vote on this then, please. Can I have a show of hands in favour of the recommendation? Anyone against? I'm sure we can turn the coolers off, yes. So we'll just confirm numbers. Pardon? So that was 9 for, 1 against, so permission is granted as per application. Thank you. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to just your thoughts on this. It's 16 minutes past 10. As I said, explained earlier, we have a very strict constitutional legal thing that we have to finish a meeting at 10:30, and that would apply even, I think, if we were in the middle of a discussion of an item. So, given the length of time it takes to give proper discussion to all planning applications, whether they're small applications or big applications, I'm minded, and I know this will be disappointing to some people, but I'm minded to stop the meeting now and hold. Now, does anyone really feel strongly against that, bearing in mind the time and the rules and the importance of proper discussion? Councillor Purdy-Horan. Put on your microphone.
Squeeze in the last item, which
No.
usually... Okay, that's fine.
No, in fairness, the order of the agenda is published. As we heard earlier on when I suggested we might be swapping things around, understandably, people are not happy about that. Yeah, no, I think, does anyone else want to say anything on this? We had got public speakers for both. I'm afraid we had got public speakers.
5 minutes each, well, and as we've just discussed it for 2 minutes, then we haven't got enough time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I think we'll have to close the meeting there. So we will reconvene, and the first items on the next item will be the items that we're having to hold over. Thank you. It's been a very long evening. Have we got a date for 2 weeks today, the 25th?
25th of October.
2 weeks today, the 25th of October. Same time, same place. So I hope you understand, but it's important we discuss these things properly. You'll be first and second. Yes, I can assure you of that. Let's just put it like this: Gotham will be first and second on the agenda. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, and thank you, colleagues, for your input this evening.